Chapter 330. Two bodyguards rushed forward and caught Xingfu before his head hit the ground. Meanwhile, a group of paramedics who had been notified by the two bodyguards rushed to the door and started treating Xingfu. The paramedics were equipped with a full set of emergency medical equipment, and almost all of them were tailored to Xingfu's constitution. It was obvious that Xingfu had experienced a lot of sickness and pain throughout his life. While the paramedics were treating the unconscious Xingfu on the floor, Xingfu's bodyguards had surrounded Punius and his bodyguard. Dozens of guns and other hidden weapons were aimed at Punius and his bodyguards. Even Fun Yuzhua wasn't spared from their assault. Both Punius and Fun Yuzhua were stunned by Xingfu's sudden turn of events. They never imagined that someone would suffer such a thing while watching a video of a game fight. Even if someone did, they had only heard about it from the grapevine. At the very least, they hadn't seen it themselves, so they didn't even think about it. Or rather, they didn't think that Xingfu's constitution would be this weak. Fun Yuzhua and the others didn't know Xingfu's genotype rank, and Fun Yuzhua had always thought that Xingfu was a rank E genotype at the very least. Among the peers he had interacted with, there was not a single person in this generation whose genes were below E rank. Even if there were, it would have been due to a genetic defect at birth that was modified by surgery. Xingfu's type was completely out of Fun Yuzhua's expectations. Xingfu's genotype wasn't even rank E? Most people with rank G genotype didn't live this long, so it had to be rank F genotype. Fun Yuzhua didn't expect the grandson of the Great Queen of Sector S to be a half-crippled rank F genotype. To Fun Yuzhua, anyone below rank E genotype was half-crippled. Xingfu's bodyguards couldn't hold back their killing intent and attacked Fun Yuzhua, Punius, and Fun Yuzhua. Their bodyguards wouldn't be able to protect them if a fight broke out, not to mention that they were on Xingfu's starship right now. There was no way they could fight back. How did this happen? How did this happen? Fun Yuzhua, what's wrong with Xingfu? Punius was now panicking. Just now, the bodyguard had already said that there was something wrong with the video, but he still couldn't believe it. After all, he had seen the video more than once, and no less than 5 people in his family had seen it, but none of them had any problems. So why did this happen the moment they arrived here? The paramedics had already set up a barrier around Xingfu, isolating him from everyone else. Punius, Fun Yuzhua, and the bodyguards couldn't see what was happening inside. I really didn't mean to hurt him, it wasn't me. It really wasn't me. Right now, Punius was terrified. If something were to happen to Xingfu, then his family would suffer a huge blow even if they didn't suffer a complete defeat. He didn't think that his family could withstand the wrath of Gene beginning and the star rank hunter behind him alone. Moreover, in this chaotic environment, everyone was cooperating with each other. Being able to rope in a good helper would also allow one to have a better foothold. The Andryra family behind Lung, the luxuries behind Fun Yuzhua, the golden beginning behind Bliss, and the star hunter behind Bliss were all powerful helpers. But now, someone was scheming to destroy their partnership. Who could it be? Even if Xingfu managed to get out of this dangerous situation alive, a crack had already been drawn in their relationship. Fun Yuzhua knew that Punius couldn't calm down right now, and neither could anyone else. After all, the most important person in the room was still being treated. Someone must be trying to use you to sow discord between us and Xingfu. Fun Yuzhua's words were directed at Punius, but it was also directed at the bodyguards who were ready to turn them into sieves with their guns. Fun Yuzhua didn't lower his voice at all, so everyone in the room heard him loud and clear. Of course I know. Do you think you'd still be alive and talking to me if you didn't? The person who spoke was one of the bodyguards who had been guarding the room just now. He was also the person who had been appointed by the Queen to protect Xingfu all this time, Du Hong. Right now, Du Hong was both regretting and blaming himself for not noticing that there was something wrong with the video. He thought that something was wrong with the game, but he didn't stop it right away. He thought that it was a problem with the game settings, but he didn't expect something like this to happen. Fenuzwa grabbed Punius by the collar and tried to calm him down. Punius, think about it. Who gave you this video? Who edited it? And who are the players in the game? Punius wasn't an idiot, so he did his best to calm himself down and think about who was the most suspicious person in the game. Young Master Fu isn't in a good state. He's in a very bad state. Du Hong's heart sank when he heard the words coming out of his communicator. Someone who was in a very bad state had to have a 70 to 80% chance of dying. Du Hong really wanted to vent his anger right now. He wanted to punch the wall, but they didn't dare to do anything too drastic because they were in a quarantine room. They were afraid that it would affect Xingfu's treatment. It was also why Du Hong hadn't ordered Punius and Fenuzwa to move immediately. Du Hong glared hatefully at Fenuzwa and Punius, his killing intent causing Fenuzwa to tremble uncontrollably. Fenuzwa's bodyguards hurriedly stepped forward to block Du Hong's line of sight. While Du Hong was panicking, one of his subordinates came over to report that Vanguard 11th Squad was requesting a call. "We don't have time," Du Hong growled. But the captain of the 11th Squad, Silin, said that he might have a way. The bodyguard stammered before quickly explaining what had happened. They had rejected Vanguard 11th Squad's communication request earlier, but they quickly discovered that one of their external communication devices had been hacked. Silin's first words after learning that something had happened to Xingfu was enough to stop them from cutting off the communication device. "He has a way?" Du Hong frowned. He didn't trust Vanguard 11th Squad, but he immediately accepted the call and allowed Silin to come over when he heard that there was another patient in critical condition inside the quarantine room. Inside the 11th Squad's starship. "You've agreed." Huimao turned to look at Silin as he pushed the debris to the side. "Yes. I'll head over right away." Silin paused for a moment before turning to look at Huimao, who was staring at him pitifully. "Put away your wings if you want to go." Whoosh! Weeza's fully spread wings instantly shrank into nothingness. "Should we continue monitoring the other two starships?" Moon asked Silin. "Of course. Make sure not to leave any traces." "Got it." Silin had told Moon to keep an eye on Xingfu's condition from the very beginning. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been notified as soon as Xingfu was in trouble. Although he couldn't directly monitor Xingfu's condition, he was able to deduce what had happened based on the movements in other parts of the starship that weren't heavily guarded. Only Xingfu's condition would cause everyone on the starship to panic. Silin learned from Du Hong that Xingfu had fainted. Silin knew a thing or two about hypnosis, and from Du Hong's words, Silin was able to deduce that the recording was a very powerful hypnosis. "How is he now?" Silin asked Du Hong after arriving at the room. "Very bad. Tell me what you need to do." Silin shook his head. "I want to check on him first." "Impossible." Du Hong refused. No one was allowed to enter Xingfu's room while he was undergoing emergency treatment, not even Du Hong. The Queen had specifically sent the paramedics to him, and they were under her direct command. Du Hong didn't have the authority to order them around, or else Xingfu wouldn't have been forced to drink a cup of warm tea without resistance. It was because the paramedics were always watching him. Huimao crouched on Silin's shoulder. The first thing he did when he arrived was look around the room. His gaze landed on a square table with some pastries and snacks on it. This was a place for entertainment, after all, and the pastries were for the people who came to the room. Seeing that Silin was going to talk to Du Hong, Huimao jumped down from Silin's shoulder and made a beeline for the table. Xingfu's bodyguards had been paying close attention to Silin the moment he walked into the room. They were on high alert. That was why everyone split their attention to keep an eye on Huimao the moment he jumped down from Silin's shoulder. What made people dumbfounded was that under the watchful eyes of so many people, in such a tense atmosphere, this guy could actually jump onto the square platform and eat as if nothing had happened. Du Hong pretended not to notice the fat cat's actions and continued chatting with Silin. Less than a minute later, however, Another piece of news came out of the quarantine room. Du Hong's face paled, and Silen circled around Du Hong and headed for the quarantine room. This time, Du Hong didn't stop him. Du Hong contacted the people inside the quarantine room. Uncle Zhuo, let him in. We can't let young Master Fu turn into a vegetable. One of the walls of the quarantine room opened up for Silen to enter. Du Hong followed him inside, while Hui Mao continued to eat on the table. Xingfu's medical team was very capable. If they hadn't treated him in time, he would have died a long time ago. It wasn't easy to keep Xingfu alive in such a state. Xingfu's condition wasn't looking good. His heart rate was erratic, sometimes as if he was in a hurry, sometimes as if he was taking a stroll. Moreover, his brain waves were very strange. Xingfu was still in a hypnotic state, and he seemed to be completely isolated from the outside world. No sound or movement could affect him, so he had to rely on himself to break free from the hypnosis. It was a very powerful hypnosis technique. What is that kid trying to do? Zhuo Xing, the person in charge of the medical team, was a middle-aged man. He was also Xingfu's doctor since he was born, and he was sent by the queen to watch over Xingfu. After checking Xingfu's condition, Silen looked around the 15-square-meter quarantine room and said to Zhuo Xing and Du Hong, "I want everyone to leave except you two." There were 4 other members of the medical team in the quarantine room, and they looked at Zhuo Xing after hearing Silen's words. Zhuo Xing nodded at them, and they left. Silen made some adjustments to the equipment connected to Xingfu's body. Zhuo Xing was just about to yell at him when Silen took out a small bottle filled with a green liquid. As soon as he saw this small bottle, Zhuo Xing's words of reprimand disappeared without a trace. His face was filled with shock and disbelief. Chapter 331. Genya had given Silen the vial, and it contained a natural plant hormone extracted from the Fuji tree. Since this was the first time he was using it on Xingfu, Silen cut the dosage in half. After injecting the green liquid into Xingfu's body, Silen paid close attention to the various physiological indicators displayed on the device. Zhuo Xing and Du Hong were dumbfounded by what they saw, and the other didn't know how to react. What shocked Zhuo Xing the most was the pattern on the vial Silen had just taken out. He had seen that pattern before in the Queen's residence. The Queen treated anything with that pattern with great importance and forbade anyone from touching it. Zhuo Xing knew that the pattern was left behind by the Queen's husband, Xingfu's grandfather. Zhuo Xing had always thought that Xingfu's grandfather was no longer alive, and that he wasn't anyone special. He had never heard of any great power or famous person in the League of Stars with the surname Zhen. But now, Silen had taken out something with that pattern on it. Du Hong noticed that Zhuo Xing was still in a daze, and he didn't stop Silen from messing around either. So, Du Hong poked Zhuo Xing with a finger. Zhuo Xing finally snapped out of his daze, but he didn't answer Du Hong's anxious gaze. He simply shook his head and motioned for Du Hong not to disturb him. Du Hong couldn't understand why Zhuo Xing, who had always been cautious and wouldn't easily allow others to interfere in his treatment, would allow Silen to run amok. Moreover, the thing that puzzled Du Hong the most was Zhuo Xing's reaction just now. Du Hong had never seen Zhuo Xing reveal such a shocked expression before. Perhaps it was because he was a doctor, but Zhuo Xing had always been calm and collected. But when Silen took out that small bottle, he nearly lost his composure completely. Zhuo Xing must know something he didn't. Just what kind of secret relationship did the Vanguard B Squadron commander, Silen, have with Golden Beginning? Before Zhuo Xing and Du Hong could think too much into it, the device connected to Xingfu's body showed a huge change in the patient's condition. Both Zhuo Xing and Du Hong's eyes widened when they saw one of the numbers on the device. The device showed that Xingfu's gene rank had changed from F to E, and it was even showing signs of evolving towards D. However, the evolution wasn't stable at all. The numbers were changing beyond the safe range. It wasn't a good sign. Normally, this phenomenon meant that there was a 60% chance that the evolution would fail for those who had been injected with genetic evolution medicine. The higher the number exceeded the safe range, the lower the success rate. Was Silen planning to upgrade Xingfu's gene rank before the treatment? Both Zhuoxing and Du Hong were thinking the same thing, but if something like this were to happen after the injection, then they had to stop the evolution process. The problem was that Silen had no intention of stopping it right now. Xingfu's body started spasming and his expression twisted. No one knew what he was thinking about that would trigger such a violent reaction. It was a tyrannical and almost irreversible hypnosis. This kind of hypnosis was very difficult to deal with. Xingfu might be able to deal with it if it were someone else, but not him. His body wouldn't be able to withstand the restorative treatment, and most of the drugs were highly resistant to it. It didn't matter how many factions were involved in this, one thing was for sure: the mastermind really wanted Xingfu's life. Du Hong had said that he would have to undergo forced treatment to save Xingfu's life, but it was very likely that the hypnotized Xingfu would turn him into an idiot. However, Silen believed that there was a high chance that Xingfu's brain would die even if he underwent forced treatment. Silen made some adjustments to the device connected to Xingfu's head. The device would generate bioelectricity to stimulate Xingfu's brain. Although the numbers displayed on the device seemed to be outside the safe range, they didn't reach the baseline of a life-threatening situation. However, Zhuoxing needed to consider the hypnosis technique. Regarding hypnosis, Zhuoxing didn't know much about it. That was why he couldn't make a proper analysis. Right now, Xingfu looked like a man who was having a nightmare. His face was filled with anxiety, fear, and even anger and disgust. Suddenly, Xingfu said something that sounded like he was talking in his sleep. However, neither Zhuoxing nor Du Hong understood what he was saying. They couldn't tell if he was speaking in a different language because of the illness. Silen understood. Xingfu said it in the imperial language of the Mist Bodhisattva Empire. What Xingfu said was, "I don't have a grandfather." Silen knew that Xingfu held a deep grudge against the queen. However, he didn't expect Genya to be the one Xingfu hated the most. It was because of Genya that Xingfu's genes were stuck at a level that could only be described as half-crippled. Moreover, the queen didn't allow them to undergo surgery to modify their genes, so they had no choice but to drag their bodies along until now. Silen had a feeling that Xingfu hated Genya. Otherwise, why would he say, "I don't have a grandfather," when he was hypnotized? He didn't know how Genya would react to that. The fact that Xingfu was able to say such a thing meant that he had broken through the absolute seal of the hypnosis. It was a benefit of his genes' evolution. "You hate him? Do you hate your grandfather?" Silen asked in the Mist Bodhisattva language. Zhuoxing and Du Hong stared at Silen without blinking. "Is he communicating with me?" Xingfu didn't respond to Silen's question, but his reaction was intense. It meant that Xingfu had not only broken through the absolute seal of the hypnosis, but also developed an external consciousness. "Do you hate him because he left you and your father with inferior genes?" Silen's voice turned slow and deep. He spoke at the perfect pitch so that Xingfu, who had developed an external consciousness, could hear him clearly without causing a negative reaction. "He didn't leave you with shackles. Your genes aren't inferior, they're not a burden, and they're not trash. They're just things that most people can't even dream of. It's just that they're sleeping right now, so you can't see what they're capable of. You've only experienced the pain of your genes for 20 years, but he's experienced it for decades. He's gone from the prime of his youth until his hair has turned white. His face is covered in wrinkles when his partner still looks young. Maybe that's why he chose to leave you and find a place to grow old in peace. He didn't want you to feel sad for him. I know that he regretted his decision later on. It's because he likes to draw 3 people, a couple, a child, and a couple. Then, he would draw many more children behind the child, but none of them had faces. I once asked him why the children didn't draw their faces. He told me that he wanted to draw them, but he couldn't. Later on, he returned home, but he wasn't as happy as he looked. He liked to wake up early, eat breakfast, stretch out a little, and then lie down on the wooden rocking chair under the Fuji tree to stare blankly at the artificial sea. Sometimes, he would close his eyes and think about the people he couldn't let go of. It was a feeling of loss. Don't blame him. If he could, he'd like to be with you. Everyone thought he liked peace and quiet, but that wasn't the case. He wanted to be surrounded by his children and grandchildren. He wanted to watch them grow up, but he had his own difficulties. His siblings' children often visited him, but he always sat in a daze for a long time after each visit. He would sit alone on the rocking chair and stare at the sky through the leaves of the Fuji tree, enjoying the gentle breeze that carried away his melancholy. Maybe he's afraid now, too. If you don't believe me, you can ask him in person. I'm sure you'll meet him soon enough. Maybe one day, he'll come for you with a huge fleet of starships. Every starship is bigger and more beautiful than this one. They'll even have a private army dressed in neat uniforms. They'll even have that leaf symbol you recognize on them. It was like a cool breeze on a hot, stifling summer afternoon. It blew away the irritating heat, but it didn't feel abrupt or violent at all. Xingfu's irritation and negative emotions gradually calmed down as Silen spoke. Zhuoxing knew that Silen's hypnotic voice wasn't the only thing that calmed Xingfu. It was the content of Silen's words that Silen calmed him down. Every son and grandchild of the queen had a personal physician, and Zhuoxing had been with Xingfu ever since he was born. That was why Zhuoxing knew a little of the language Xingfu was speaking, but he didn't understand it well enough to understand what they were saying. He didn't expect Silen to know about it. Zhuoxing and Du Hong really wanted to know what Silen was talking to Xingfu about. How in the world did he manage to calm Xingfu down and speak in such a strange language? What in the world was he talking about? Both Zhuoxing and Du Hong were conflicted. This young man was like a mystery. You thought you knew him well, but he could overturn your assumptions the very next moment. Zhuoxing and Du Hong's jaws nearly dropped to the floor when they saw Xingfu's childish smile. When they saw the gene rank on the machine, they felt like they were about to faint. On the instrument, the letter that was fluctuating unstably from E to D had turned into B at some point in time. But at this time, Silen had stopped the subsequent evolution of his genes. Silen's words had a hypnotic effect. It was a process that would guide Xingfu's consciousness and help him recover from the extreme state he was in. Combined with the medicine he injected, Xingfu's genes evolved smoothly. Silen knew that the Gen family's genes were special. They needed to stimulate their genes twice. If they only received the first injection and did not receive the second stimulation, their gene level would deteriorate and get worse. Only after the second injection would they be able to stabilize their genes. That was why every member of the Gen family who had undergone 2 genetic evolutions had genes equivalent to a rank in the League of Stars, or even higher. Aside from the Fuji tree extract, the other genetic evolutions used by the League of Stars were actually harmful to the Gen family's genes. This was probably why the Queen didn't allow them to undergo genetic surgery. The evolution of Xingfu's genes had increased his resistance by a lot, and it was far superior to his rank F genes. Therefore, it didn't take long for Xingfu to wake up after his genes stabilized at rank B and Silen stopped the evolution process. Du Hong wanted nothing more than to stick his head close to the machine and look at the data. After Xingfu woke up, he ignored Zhuoxing and Du Hong. Instead, he stared at Silen for a long time before he finally asked, "You're not my long-lost brother from the same father but from different mothers, are you?" Silen. Chapter 332. Even though the quarantine room hadn't been closed yet, the news that Xingfu was out of danger had already spread to the outside world. The atmosphere outside finally relaxed a lot after Xingfu woke up. Punius was thinking about how he could salvage the relationship between the two sides after Xingfu came out of the quarantine room. After all, Punius was one of the victims in this incident, but it was also an undeniable fact that Xingfu had almost lost his life. Punius couldn't shirk the responsibility. Punius hated the person who used him to the bone, and he couldn't help but feel uneasy if he couldn't find that person. He had a nagging feeling that he could be used again at any moment. He didn't want to experience something like that again. If Xingfu hadn't woken up this time, there was no telling if Punius would have been able to leave this starship in one piece. Xingfu didn't leave the quarantine room immediately after Zhuoxing confirmed that Xingfu was as good as he could be. After sending Zhuoxing and Du Hong away, Xingfu asked Silin a lot of questions about Zhenya, but Silin only answered a few of them. He told Xingfu about his relationship with Zhenya, and that Zhenya couldn't come to see them for the time being. "When can he come to see us?" Xingfu asked. That was what Xingfu wanted to know the most. "We'll see. The situation in the League of Stars is very unstable right now. It's a mess, and if he comes, it'll only cause more chaos." Xingfu raised an eyebrow when he heard Silin's question. "Is the Zhen family you mentioned really that big of a family?" "It is. But I'm sorry, but I can't say too much right now. He'll explain everything to you when the time comes." Silin didn't want to talk about the Mist Bodhisattva Empire at a time like this. Xingfu glanced at the device connected to his body. The gene rank displayed on it was enough to make him excited. At this moment, he felt as if he had endless energy and was very energetic. He was not as weak as before, where even the slightest movement would cause discomfort. From his conversation with Xingfu, Silin learned that his younger sister, Zhen Xingji, often followed his aunt, star rank hunter Prisa. His father had also been assisting the queen in managing Golden Beginnings affairs. Before Xingfu's genes evolved, Xingfu was the weakest among his siblings and father. His younger sister, Xingji, was slightly better off than him even though her genes were also rank F. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been dragged around by Prisa. "When will my next injection be?" "That depends on your body's ability to adapt. If you adapt well, you'll be able to undergo the second injection very quickly. If you don't adapt well, you'll have to drag it out for a period of time. It might even take a few years or even decades." "Alright, that will depend on my own ability. If I don't have that ability, even if I increase my gene level, it will be a waste." Xingfu had a clear understanding of his own abilities, and he was patient enough to deal with this problem. He wasn't the type to rush things. "What are you going to Sector S for this time?" "I can't say for sure in the outside world, but I'm sure I can help you in Sector S." Xingfu wasn't boasting. Right now, Sector S was controlled by the three great forces, and foreign forces couldn't interfere at all. Even if they were working together, there was no way they could openly enter Sector S. If Punius, Funyuzwa, and the others weren't accompanied by Xingfu, they would have been blown to smithereens the moment they entered Sector S. "I'm looking for something your grandfather left behind before he left. It might contain information about your father and grandmother." Silin didn't plan to hide it from Xingfu, and Silin was planning to borrow Xingfu's power to search for it. It would save him a lot of trouble. "I'll help you too. I don't have anything to do anyway. I was a coward before my genes evolved, but now I want to travel around. There are a lot of places in Sector S that I haven't been to before." Moreover, there were plenty of people in Fire Phoenix and Flying Snake who recognized Xingfu even if they weren't in Golden Beginnings territory. "Alright. I'll meet the queen after I find it. Your grandfather left something for her and your father, and you can ask him for your gifts when you see him. He doesn't know about your existence yet, after all." Xingfu curled his lips and paused for a moment. Then, he asked curiously, "What did my grandfather leave for my father and grandmother? You want to see it?" Under Xingfu's expectant gaze, Silin took out the badge. It was a royal badge that looked similar to the one Zhen Xingming's father wore. It was decorated with the unique patterns of the royal family's core bloodline. Xingfu stared at the badge for a long time and thought about many things. He could tell that the badge was unique from the rest of the world. He could sense its rarity and value even without touching it. It wasn't something that could be bought with money, and the materials were rare enough to make it. He left this to your father, Silen said. The reason he took it out was to reassure Xingfu and dispel the last bit of doubt in his mind. After observing it for a moment, Xingfu pointed at the patterns on the badge. This pattern is a little different from the ones I've seen before. This is a family badge that only members of the royal family or those who are very close to them can wear. It's different from the ones that normal people in the Gen family wear. The ones you've seen before only have the Gen family's crest on them, not this one. Xingfu exclaimed in realization. That means my cheap grandfather has a pretty high status in the Gen family. Silen nodded and put the badge away. It was best not to take out Genya's items before he handed them over to the rightful owner. Oh right, do you know who's trying to kill you? That hypnosis is very powerful. If it weren't for your special genes, you probably wouldn't have woken up, Silen asked. I don't know. Xingfu's eyes flashed with killing intent at the mention of this, but he managed to keep his cool. Maybe I didn't offend anyone. Maybe our cooperation made someone realize that we're in danger, and that's why they're trying to stop us. Silen nodded. Xingfu was a very rational person, and he looked at the problem objectively. Xingfu didn't tell anyone else apart from Zhuoxing and Du Hong that he had just recovered from a serious illness. Xingfu didn't tell anyone other than Zhuoxing and Du Hong that his genetic rank had increased. He told them to keep it a secret, not even to the queen. He would only tell the rest of his family after he found the thing Silen was talking about. He didn't want to spread the news until then. He didn't want anyone to think about it. Xingfu expressed that he didn't blame Punius for his careful probing. He even comforted him for a while. Their cooperation wouldn't be affected by this matter, but they still needed to find the culprit as soon as possible. Fenuzwa felt that Xingfu had changed. He still looked sickly, but he didn't look as gloomy as before. In the past, Xingfu's eyes were filled with all kinds of negative emotions even when he smiled. Now, however, he looked a lot more cheerful. Silen asked Xingfu for a star map of Sector S. In the League of Stars, only the people who knew the star maps of their territories the best, and they were the only ones who could obtain the most accurate star map. If it weren't for this incident, Silen wouldn't have been able to obtain a detailed star map from Xingfu to find his target planet. Ever since the chaos in the League of Stars began, Sector S's reshuffle had swept through the entire sector. Many outside forces tried to intervene, but none of them ended up well. Flying Snake, Fire Phoenix, and Golden Beginning worked together to clean up Sector S. Every prison in Sector S was destroyed in the process. Not a single prison, from low to high, was spared. In the process of the destruction of the prison, some planets were also destroyed in battles and shuffling battles. Then, new areas and new boundaries were divided. The new star maps were very different from the old ones. What Xingfu had was the current star map of Sector S, but he didn't have the old one. The new star maps undoubtedly increased the difficulty of Silen's search. Silen had no choice but to search for planets based on their approximate distribution and orbital estimate. At the same time, he borrowed some incomplete star maps from other people and pieced together some old star maps of Sector S. Then, with the fragmented star maps stored in his memory, Silen began his search. Silen stayed on Xingfu's starship. Xingfu prepared a lounge for Silen and provided him with all the necessary equipment. Silen also asked Moon and the others to find a way to collect some old star maps and sift through them. Huimao didn't return to the 11th Squad while Silen was here, so he didn't have to clean up the mess on the ground. Moreover, Xingfu had his men prepare a lot of food for Huimao. Unlike before, Huimao didn't try to hide the fact that he could speak. Now that he had someone to rely on, he didn't have to worry about the League of Stars' strange scientists trying to capture him. In Huimao's own words, he would kill one if they came, and kill a group if they came. He had a helper. Since Xing Fu couldn't get more information out of Silin, he decided to start with Hui Mao. He was very curious about the origin of Hui Mao's second grandpa's master, but Hui Mao kept his mouth shut despite his gluttonous nature. It was as if it had set up a program for itself. The moment it was about to say something, the program would remind it to shut up. This outcome was a huge blow to Xing Fu. The fat cat might look stupid, but it hadn't told him anything of value, and yet it had unwittingly pulled them closer together. Xing Fu attributed the food Hui Mao provided him to be the reason why Xing Fu was so eager to get closer to him. If it wasn't for the food, the bastard probably wouldn't even have bothered to talk to him. After careful investigation and comparative analysis, Silin decided on a location. Most of the subdivisions around the planet had been preserved in their original state, and it wasn't a former prison. Speaking of which, Silin had been there before. When Silin Helong first came to Sector S, he rescued Flying Snake, Tsijiu and Tsijiu's 2 lieutenants, Snacko and Serpent. Then, he sent them to the planet Tsijiu mentioned. It was only after Silin had gone through thousands of selections and verifications that he had finally confirmed that it was indeed that planet. That planet had always been Flying Snake's territory. Maybe that was why Genya had left the items there, a place where Golden Beginning couldn't find them easily. It would seem that Golden Beginning wasn't completely unified back then. Now that the Flying Snake organization had grown stronger, Tsijiu's authority in Flying Snake had grown even stronger. Barring any accidents, it was only a matter of time before Tsijiu officially took over Flying Snake's authority. When Flying Snake became one of the 3 great forces of Sector S, the planet Silin settled on became Tsijiu's territory. The people in charge of the planet's defense had to be on high alert when the starships didn't belong to Flying Snake. However, when they saw Golden Beginning's emblem on Xing Fu's starship, they immediately notified their superiors and had them negotiate with Xing Fu. "If you see any good seedlings, you can recruit them," Xing Fu said to Silin with a smile while waiting for a reply. After all the prisons in Sector S were destroyed, every force tried to recruit a lot of people. "If you think they're suitable, you can consider recruiting them. The people who came out of the prisons are all very strong. Of course we'll do our best if we find any good ones." The planet responded very quickly, and the person who came to greet them was someone Silin knew. It was one of Tsijiu's followers, the strength type Snacko. By the time Snacko was done talking to Xing Fu, he learned that Xing Fu was looking for someone on Sector S. Sector S wasn't exactly in a position to refuse. After all, they were partners now, and a 3-way alliance was the only way to stabilize Sector S. The starships docked at the spaceport outside of the planet, and Xing Fu and his bodyguards boarded a spaceplane to enter the planet. Silin and his men followed suit. Snarker had already arrived at the designated landing spot to welcome Chigio. He had also assigned more people to guard the perimeter. He didn't want anything bad to happen to the young master of Golden Beginning. If that happened, he wouldn't be able to shirk his responsibility, and it might even affect Chigio's ability to take over Flying Snake. At first, Snacko's attention was focused on Xing Fu, but when he saw the people who came with Xing Fu, Snacko's face twitched. The cat looked very familiar, except that it was a size fatter than he remembered. That being said, it couldn't hide the dirty look in its eyes. Snacko had seen a lot of cats in his life, but none of them made him want to punch them in the face. However, Snacko noticed that the cat was sitting on the shoulder of someone he didn't know. Who was this person? Snacko didn't have much time to think about this right now. After exchanging a few pleasantries with Xing Fu, he led them to a place to rest. Ever since Flying Snake became one of Sector S's 3 hegemons, a lot of magnificent buildings had been added to the planet. Snacko had arranged for them to stay at a high-class hotel. It was a special place that only the upper echelons of Flying Snake or some important guests would stay at. "May I know who you're looking for, young Master Fu?" Since we're on this planet, we should be able to help you and save you some time, Snacko said. The hidden meaning behind his words was, tell us who you are and we'll leave after we find you. Xingfu looked at Silen. Silen was the only one who knew the answer to this question. Before Silen could say anything, however, Huimao complained, why isn't there any dried fish? There aren't even fish biscuits here. Is this how you treat your savior? Snacko's expression stiffened. I knew it. He knew this cat was hard to please. Patiently ordering for some dried fish to be served, Snacko asked Huimao, where's Silen? Aren't you with him? Now that Snacko knew Lung's true identity, he understood that the young master of the Andryra family wouldn't hang out with a hunter very often. He probably had a lot of things on his hands right now, so he wouldn't have the time to visit Sector S. Huimao picked up a piece of dried fish and popped it into his mouth. He squinted his eyes and chewed for a while before he finally tilted his head and pointed at the person sitting next to him. Isn't this the one? Your eyesight is terrible. After listening to Silen's explanation, Snacko finally confirmed that the person in front of him was Silen. Since Silen was here, Snacko had to report to Tsijiu no matter what. He was their savior after all, so he should at least greet him when they met again. Silen Helong was the one who helped them during their most dangerous time. Snacko had never forgotten this. As for the cat, well, never mind. Right now, Tsijiu was dealing with business on another planet. Now that his power had grown, he couldn't come over and talk to Silen face to face. After chatting for a while through video chat, Tsijiu asked Snacko to do his best to help Silen find the person he was looking for. Silen asked Snacko for a map of the planet, and Silen did a quick search based on Jenya's description. However, a lot of areas on the planet had been reorganized over the years, and the old areas had undergone major changes. Therefore, Silen asked for the old map again. Snacko wouldn't have given it to anyone else. After all, these things involved internal secret. But since Tsijiu asked Snacko to do his best, and Silen had saved his life, Snacko gave him the old map without hesitation. Xingfu didn't express anything on the surface when he saw Snacko's reaction, but deep down, he was shocked. Although Silen had told him about how he had saved Tsijiu and his two assistants, it seemed that there was more to it than that. Silen and Tsijiu were definitely working together. Otherwise, someone like Tsijiu wouldn't have asked Snacko to hand over a few maps that contained secret information and strategic arrangements. Silen pointed at one of the places and asked Snacko, "Are the residents still here?" Snacko looked at the place Silen was pointing at and shook his head regretfully. This place was rebuilt a long time ago. I think it's been more than 20 years. I'll help you find out who you're looking for. I'll see if I can find out where they live now. That works too. Silen turned off the map and said, "Help me find out who Hara is." Snacko's hand froze just as he was about to search for information. He turned to look at Silen and asked again, as if to confirm something, "Who are you looking for?" "Hara." Silen enunciated each word clearly this time. However, Snacko and Xingfu both had a strange look on their faces when they heard the name. "Are you talking about that chubby guy who likes to laugh a lot and always rolls his tongue when he speaks, that Hara?" Snacko's eyes widened. Silen thought for a moment and confirmed that Jenya did describe that person. He nodded affirmatively and said, "Yes, I'm sure of it." Xingfu looked surprised. "Food King Hara has it?" Chapter 333. Food King Hara? The name made him sound like a glutton, and he really was a glutton, and a very meticulous one at that. "Is he very famous?" Silen asked. "Very," Snacko and Xingfu said in unison. "I really am ignorant and ill-informed." "No, you should know about this." Snacko took out a bag. It was the outer packaging of a compressed fruit biscuit, and there was a big smiley face logo on the bag. Silen recognized the smiley face. It was a very popular candy brand in the League of Stars, and Tang Qiuqiu had bought it before. However, Silen hadn't paid much attention to it until now. He did look it up once, and the only thing he learned was that it was produced by the Andryra family's factory. That was why Scylla didn't pay much attention to it after that. The one food Scylla paid the most attention to was fish biscuit. Huimao had grown pickier and pickier because he had to buy cat food often. As a result, Scylla was far more familiar with fish biscuits than any other food. Unfortunately, the smiley face logo's factory didn't produce fish biscuits. The Andryra family's other factory didn't produce fish biscuits, and it wasn't this smiley face factory. Sector S had always kept a low profile, and the Andryra family and Hara had helped him a lot. As a result, the public didn't know about the Food King. It wasn't until the League of Stars fell into chaos that the name Food King gradually became known. Maybe a lot of people knew about the smiley face and the Food King, but only a handful of them had actually seen the Food King in person. There might be a few people in Sector S who had seen him, but there were very few outside of it. So you're saying that the owner of this smiley face logo is Food King Hara? I've always thought that it's a brand under the Andryra family. The Andryra family is only working with Food King Hara. Snacko showed Scylla some information about Food King Hara. Hara had always been interested in eating since he was young. To him, eating was a form of enjoyment. He had never received any higher education. He had started out as a waiter in a restaurant, and he had worked his way up from the bottom up. The most legendary thing about him was that he was originally a D-rank genotype, but he gradually became an A-rank genotype after eating so much. Eat to become an A-class. This was indeed not something an ordinary person could do. No wonder he was qualified to be called the Food King. Some people say that he can bestow a specific mood on a type of food. I don't know if that's true or not. After all, there are too few people who have eaten the food he personally made. But there must be a reason for all this. Even if the Food King isn't as godly as the legends say, he's not far from it. However, Food King rarely cooks for people to eat nowadays. Even my boss hasn't eaten it before. There was also a rumor that even Food King's own sons and grandsons might not be able to eat the food he personally made, but a little beggar on the side of the road might accidentally eat the food he made. Everything depended on the mood of Food King. That's why I say it's a rare blessing to be able to eat the Food King's food, Snacko said with a yearning look on his face. Xingfu calmly took a sip of his tea before answering, I've eaten it before. Snacko and Scylla. Are you trying to show off your good fortune? Seeing that neither Snacko nor Scylla were saying anything, Xingfu continued, I've eaten it more than once. Snacko really wanted to punch the man who was trying his best to maintain his composure, but couldn't hide the smug grin on his face. Food King, you're truly deserving of your title, Xingfu exclaimed. How do I contact Food King Hara? Scylla asked. Snacko looked at Xingfu but didn't say anything. He really didn't know where the Food King lived. In fact, he didn't even know that he lived on this planet before. The Food King really was a mysterious person. All he knew was that he had an eccentric personality, and while he liked to smile, there were times when there was a dagger hidden behind his smile, and other times it was as warm as a spring breeze. He was a complicated person, or else he wouldn't have risen to his current status and influence. Xingfu shook his head. I don't have his contact details, but I can ask my father. He knows. Xingfu's father, Zhenxing, was the closest person to Food King Hara in Golden Beginning, and Hara treated him very well. Xingfu and Xingji were given special treatment because of Zhenxing, or else they wouldn't have been able to eat the Food King's food so often. Xingfu contacted Zhenxing and asked for Hara's contact details, but Zhenxing wouldn't tell him. Xingfu spent almost an hour pestering Zhenxing, even resorting to acting pitiful and coquettish tactics that he hated the most, before he finally agreed to contact Hara. Of course, Zhenxing wouldn't give him Hara's contact details without Hara's permission. Otherwise, it would only bring trouble to Hara. The call was connected with multiple layers of encryption, meaning that Hara really didn't like to be disturbed. It also proved that Hara really did treat Genshin very well. After the video communication was transferred, a chubby smiling face appeared on the holographic screen. It was impossible to tell the man's age, but the skin on his face was very smooth. It was probably the result of eating too much. He looked very spirited. "Grandpa Food King," Xingfu called out to the person on the screen. It was mostly respectful. "What trouble have you run into, little Xingfu? Why are you calling me so urgently?" Hara asked with a kind smile. "I have a friend who wants to ask you something. It's urgent." Xingfu emphasized the word urgent to avoid Hara's reaction. But he didn't say anything because Snacko had shamelessly stayed at the side and said that he wanted to witness the Food King's glory. Hara didn't get angry. "Oh? Who has something to ask me?" Xingfu gestured for Silen to come over. "Hello, I'm Silen." Silen spoke to Hara on the screen. His tone was respectful, not cautious or fearful, but rather respectful, as if he was talking to a senior. Hala was impressed by this. "What do you want to ask me?" "I'm here to retrieve something he left with you." The smile on Hara's face froze for a moment before slowly fading away. Behind Silen, Snacko and Xingfu didn't even dare to breathe too loudly. They had never seen Hara without a smile before, and no one would ever use the word serious on him. It was something they couldn't even imagine. But now they had. Snacko had the urge to run away from this place. Even though it was just a video, the pressure he felt was enough to make him shiver all over. "What is it?" Food King Hara's tone was indifferent, but it made the atmosphere grow a lot colder. However, there was a hint of uncontrollable excitement in Hara's eyes. Even with his many years of experience, he still couldn't control the excitement in his eyes. It was obvious how much of an impact this matter had on him. "A notebook." Food King Hara lowered his eyelids and sucked in a deep breath. Then, he looked at Snarker and Silen and said, "The two of you leave. No one is allowed to enter this place until we're done talking." Snacko and Xingfu hurriedly opened the door and left as if they had just been granted amnesty. It was only after Snacko left the room that he realized that he was a member of Flying Snake, and he only listened to Tsijiu's orders. However, he had unknowingly obeyed Hara's orders without even the slightest hesitation. "Is this the aura of the Food King?" After Snacko and Xingfu left, Hara asked Silen in the Mist Bodhisattva language, "What happened to him?" Silen also answered in the Mist Bodhisattva language, "My master is doing very well." Hara was planning to probe Silen to see if he was lying, but Silen's answer caught him off guard. It was rare for the Food King to look surprised. Hara, who usually only wore a smile on his face today, was wearing a couple of expressions other than a smile. Hara couldn't be blamed for his surprise. After all, Genya was already like that when he left. Even after so many years, Hara had mentally prepared himself to hear news of Genya's death. He didn't expect Silen to say something like this. "He's doing very well, what do you mean?" "He's doing very well right now, but he can't come to see you. That's why he asked me to retrieve the notebook he left with you all those years ago. He said that I can find out what I want to know in that notebook." A minute of silence later, Hara asked, "Where are you right now?" Hara let out a chuckle when Silen told him the coordinates and the address. It almost looked like he was relieved. "What a coincidence. Come find me, I'm right here. Oh, and bring Xingfu with you as well." As he spoke, Hara took out a map and marked out their current location. The place Hara marked was exactly the area Genya had mentioned. It was the same area that had been renovated, but the buildings had changed a long time ago. Silen didn't expect Hara to still be there. Not even Snacko knew about it. Silen led Xingfu and Huimao to the place Hara pointed out. The renovated area was now a bustling food street. No one would have thought that the famous Food King would be hiding in this noisy street. There were tall buildings on both sides of the street. The lower floors of the buildings were filled with all kinds of snacks and restaurants, while the upper floors were occupied by residential areas. There was a very large restaurant on this food street with a big smiley face as its signboard. It was a famous brand both inside and outside of Sector S. Business was booming right now, and it had always been. When Silen and Xingfu arrived at the restaurant, there was already someone waiting for them in front of the entrance. The man led Silen and Xingfu to the top 3 floors of the building where the shop was located. It was where Hara lived. No one expected Hara to live here, and no one expected him to live with a bunch of normal people. Hara's status and wealth were more than enough to buy the entire building. The top 3 floors of the building were 3-in-1 duplex apartments. The door opened on its own when Silen and Xingfu arrived at the entrance. After Silen and Xingfu walked in, the door closed behind them again. Huimao couldn't help but stare at the delicious aroma of food as soon as he walked in. The decor inside the building was simple, and it wasn't luxurious at all. Instead, there were paintings hanging on the walls, and they smelled different flavors of sweetness. There were different kinds of sweet smells coming from the paintings. These paintings were all painted with sugar. Hara walked out of his bedroom. He was fat, but every step he took was steady. He didn't look clumsy because of his weight. "Hello." Silen and Xingfu greeted him. Hara walked up to Silen and examined him from head to toe. Then, his gaze lingered on the curly leaf pattern on Silen's finger. "It really is him. That guy is really..." Hara was very excited. "Is he really alive?" "He's alive. He's alive and well. Then why didn't he come back to visit us all these years? He didn't have to hide for so many years." Hara slapped the armrest of his chair twice in excitement. Huimao, who was pretending to steal food, jumped in fright and bristled like a cat on its tail. Silen sighed. He forced himself to enter a deep hibernation, or he would have died prematurely. After he returned to his hometown, he received treatment and continued to live. "That's true." Hara stood up and walked into his bedroom. When he came out, he was holding a small notebook in his hand. However, the notebook was locked. Hara pointed at the nearby study and said to Silen, "Let's go there. Xingfu, come talk to me." Hara wasn't going to let Xingfu see the log, so Xingfu didn't follow Silen into the room to see its contents. Silen walked into the study while Huimao stayed outside. Huimao had grown a lot bolder after being caught stealing food from Hara, but he didn't get scolded. It was a perfect example of what it meant to take a mile when given an inch. Silen looked at the notebook in his hand and pointed the leaf pattern at the lock. Click. The lock was removed and the notebook opened on its own. Genya had originally planned to keep this notebook as his personal journal, but he didn't expect it to be used like this. The video and Genya's notes recorded Genya's voyage route before he came to the League of Stars, and some of the things he did after he came to the League of Stars. Genya happened to be in Sector S when he first came to the League of Stars, and Angenia saved him not long after. It was Genya's luck. If he hadn't run into Angenia, his chances of survival would have been extremely low. Moreover, the League of Stars was a place where only the strong ruled, so the nobles of the Mist Bodhisattva Empire were basically blind. They didn't have a private army to protect them, and while they were strong enough to protect themselves against lower-rank people, they were nothing more than a weakling in the eyes of the hunters of the universe. As time went by, Genya and Annie gradually developed feelings for each other. There were a lot of people who didn't understand why someone as outstanding as Annie would fall for someone as mediocre as Genya, and they ridiculed him. When Genya first met Hara, he was still very young, barely an adult. At the time, Hara was just a waiter in a small restaurant on the food street. Later on, Hara got into an argument with the owner of the restaurant over food ingredients, resigned in anger, and was almost beaten to death by the restaurant owner's men. Genya was the one who saved him. Or more accurately, it was Genya who ordered his bodyguard to save Hara. Hara was the one who suggested Genya to open the Smiley Face restaurant in the first place. Genya even invested in it, or Hara wouldn't have been able to get the money to open it. In the video, Two rather young people were smiling foolishly at a small shop. "Hara, I believe you'll be able to spread the joy of your food to everyone," the young Genya said. Of course. As the restaurant grew bigger and Hara became more and more famous, Angenia would come to eat Hara's food from time to time. Genya even taught Angenia and Hara the mist bodhisattva language. Genya called Angenia Annie. At that time, Annie was quite a dazzling figure. There were also some notes written by Genya at the bottom of the notebook. It could be seen that although Genya was very homesick at that time, his feelings of not being able to return home were comforted by the presence of his lover Annie and good friend Hara. Annie's brilliance only served to highlight Genya's mediocrity. Many people said that Genya was a shameless man who lived off a woman. Genya also knew that he didn't have the ability, wasn't smart enough, and wasn't ruthless enough. Even the only thing he had that was his background was nothing in the GL, and he had to keep it a secret. But for Annie's sake, he endured the ridicule and abuse. Later on, Annie gave birth to Genya's son, Xingfu's father, Genxing. It was a very normal thing for others, but for Genya, it could only be described as having a son in his old age. This was because Genya's aging had accelerated at that time. He hadn't received the second injection when he was an adult. He had stayed in the Star Alliance for the past few decades. At that moment, his genes had deteriorated, making him appear old. Hara was still young, Angenia was still young, the bodyguards were still young, everyone was still young, but Genya was already old. Genya told Angenia about the Gen family's one-star rule, and that every fifth generation would have the word Xing in their name. Genya's grandchildren happened to be the fifth generation, so Genxing's children should have the word Xing in their names as well. Silen had a feeling that Genya himself was afraid that Angenia might have forgotten the Gen family's rule, and that the word Xing would never appear in their names. It was obvious that Angenia hadn't forgotten the rule. In fact, she remembered it very clearly and followed it. The competition in Sector S was fiercer than many places outside of Sector S, and it was all about methods and ruthlessness. At the time, the ruler of Golden Beginning only had 2 daughters, and Angenia was raised to be the heir since she was young. At the time, Angenia hadn't officially ascended to the throne yet, and Golden Beginning wasn't as stable as it was today. Genxing alone was enough to distract Angenia, but Genya was also a burden. Genya didn't want to become a burden to Angenia. That was why he had been careful not to become a burden to Golden Beginning. He didn't want to become a burden to Angenia. He didn't want to become a burden to Golden Beginning. Based on Genya's mood notes alone, Silen could tell that Genya was filled with intense self-loathing at the time. Just like how Xingfu was filled with resentment earlier, their genes had determined their uniqueness. In GL, the Fuji royal family's Gen family didn't work, and Genya couldn't help them at all. The last image in the notebook was taken when Hara visited Genya. In the image, Genya was holding little Genxing in his arms, and their faces were leaning against each other intimately. Genxing's long eyelashes brushed past Genya's wrinkled face, and it was as if the warmth was tickling Genya's heart. Hara teased Genxing, "Give your daddy a kiss and I'll record it for you." Genxing seemed to understand Hara's words, and he moved closer to Genya with his toothless mouth and kissed Genya's face full of saliva. Genya smiled until his face was covered in wrinkles. After that, Hara made a milk cake that even the tiny Genxing could eat. It was called Butterfly's Kiss. At the end of the image, Genya wrote, "Butterfly's kiss is delicious. There's an indelible sense of happiness in it. It's a feeling that can never be erased. I think it's time for me to be content." On the last page of the notebook, Genya used a candy stick to draw some pictures of Genxing and Angenia. Silen closed the notebook and closed his eyes. He could feel Genya's sadness and helplessness. Genya couldn't be a hard-working father like Shusag, and he couldn't even protect himself in a place like Sector S. At the time, he couldn't even protect himself. The good news was that everything was over and Genya would return. Silin thought that he could show Xingfu some of the things in the notebook and help him understand Zhenya better. But when Silin opened the door, his melancholy was instantly shattered. This cat is so embarrassing. Chapter 334. 1 hour ago, Hara was planning to chat with Xingfu after Silin entered his study, but he noticed the cat's furtive movements and asked, "What are you looking for, little fat cat?" "Of course I'm looking for food." Still, Huimao knew how to hide his true intentions. After scanning his surroundings for a moment, Huimao said in a self-righteous tone, "Of course I'm looking at your paintings. Your paintings aren't that great after all." Xingfu turned his head away. How could he say something like that? Xingfu didn't bother looking at Hara's expression. He was sitting next to Hara, and he could tell that Hara wasn't angry after hearing Xingfu's words, but there was something different about the easygoing attitude he used to have. He still cared. Hara raised an eyebrow a little, but the smile on his face didn't fade. "Oh!" Huimao raised his chin and pointed a paw at a painting hanging on the wall. "That one is terrible." Hara followed the cat's paw and looked at the painting. It was a painting he'd made on a whim when he went to the sea for a stroll. He'd used edible seaweed powder and various kinds of powdered sugar. The painting was of a blue ocean with waves crashing against each other. If one were to get close, they would be able to smell the sea breeze. It was refreshing, but not fishy. There were a lot of different smells, but they weren't disgusting. Every visitor would be able to smell different scents and experience different emotions when they walked around the room, and the main reason for this effect was the paintings hanging on the wall. It was an art of combining scents. It might seem simple, but it was actually incredibly difficult. It was something Hara had always been proud of. "Then I'll have to trouble you to give me some pointers." Hara was still smiling as he removed the cover on the painting. Huimao wagged his tail and trotted over to the painting. Then, he leaped up and nailed his paw to the wall. Perhaps it was because of his size, but Huimao slid down a little after he leaped onto the wall. Xingfu and Hara were just about to get up to catch him, but the cat quickly regained its footing and scuttled back up the wall. After circling the painting once, Huimao stuck out his tongue and licked it. Therefore, when Silin opened the door, he saw the holes made by the cat's claws on the wall. The cat licked the powdered sugar stuck to its fur and raised its paw to point at the painting that had been licked. It said in an authoritative tone, "Sea beasts look like this, meow." His words were filled with righteousness. On the painting that had been licked by Huimao, the powdered sugar had been licked away, revealing the dark background underneath. The shape formed by this dark background was exactly how Blue Skin looked when he swung his tail and swam upright. Probably no one would think that it was an overlord of the sea, but a seal for people's entertainment. Silin walked over and unscrewed the Huimao from the wall. He apologized to Hara. "I'm really sorry for the trouble." Hara chuckled and waved his hand. It's fine. That little seal sure knows how to lick." Huimao was licking his claws when Silin grabbed the back of his neck. When he heard Hara's words, he immediately bristled. "That's a sea beast." "A sea beast? It's the overlord of the sea. Do you understand, fatty?" Xingfu lowered his head and pretended not to hear anything. There weren't many people in the League of Stars who dared to call Hara a fatty in front of his face. Silin pinched Wheeze's toothy mouth and said to Hara, "It doesn't really know how to express itself, and it's terrible at drawing." That being said, Silin pointed at the image of a seal swimming upright with its tail wagging. "That is indeed what a big sea beast did." "All right, let's not talk about this anymore. Have you looked through the contents of the notebook, Silin?" Hara asked. He didn't think much of the sea beast that Silin and Huimao were talking about. Silin nodded. "Yes, I have. I know a thing or two about my master's departure." Hara let out a long sigh and told Silin and Xingfu some things that weren't recorded in the notebook. Not long after the butterfly kiss, Zhenya left Sector S with Hara's help. Hara never made another butterfly kiss after that. Hara had always felt guilty towards Zhenxing because he was the one who made Zhenya leave Sector S. Angenia hated Hara a lot because of this. However, Hara would always make some food for Yuanxing's birthday, and he gave Xingfu and Xingji his own food for them when they were 10 years old. Xingfu realized that Hara was making food for them because of his father, Zhenxing. Hara probably wouldn't do it even if he was the queen's grandson. Where is Genya now? Can't Angenia and I bring him back? Hara asked stubbornly. No. Silen thought for a moment before asking Hara, Master hasn't told you about his family, has he? He rarely mentions his family, not even in front of Angenia. Master's background is actually much bigger than you can imagine. Even if the 3 great forces of Sector S were to join forces, they may not necessarily be able to beat the Gen family. You'll know when he comes back. Back in the Mist Bodhisattva Empire, Silen had seen the Gen family's private army. However, the 3 kings rarely mobilized their private army, so most people didn't know how powerful they were. That being said, there was no way a royal family would be weak. The problem was that the Gen family would definitely send a large number of their private army to accompany Genya, but they weren't sure if the spacetime vortex could allow a large number of troops to pass through. Moon and Shurtang had been studying this problem for a long time, and they should be able to come to a conclusion soon. Hara decided to tag along when he learned that Silen was going to visit Angenia and Zhenxing. He was planning to visit Zhenxing in the near future anyway. Hara also gave Silen a gift. It was a square box about 10 centimeters long, and there were a couple of pills inside it. They might look small, but they could save a person's life at a critical moment. It was a kind of handmade food made by Hara himself, and every single one of them contained the perfect amount of nutrients to support a person's energy needs for 3 to 5 days. It was a great item for a hunter who often traveled the universe. Plus, there was no way the Food King's food would be bad. Snarker was feeling incredibly complicated when he saw off Silen's group at the waterway entrance. He didn't expect to see Hara here. It would be impossible for the higher-ups of Flying Snake not to know about this, but the problem was that Tsijiu didn't. It looked like Tsijiu wasn't at the top of Flying Snake's management just yet. We still need to work hard, everyone. Golden Beginnings headquarters. Zhenxing was busy dealing with some matters at hand. At the same time, he was wondering what Hara meant by that. Who was that young man that Food King treated him differently? His personal communicator rang while he was thinking. It was Xingfu. 2 minutes later. The bodyguard standing guard outside Genxing's room saw their usually calm boss run out of the room in a hurry, giving orders to his subordinates as he ran. It looked like he was going to pick up someone. Everyone in Golden Beginnings headquarters was in an uproar because the queen, who hadn't shown herself for a long time, had finally shown up. Moreover, both the queen and Zhenxing looked very excited. Apparently, the queen had been smiling a lot more recently than before. Everyone in Golden Beginnings headquarters was very curious. Just who was it that could cause these two to behave like this? It didn't take long for everyone to receive the news. Young Master Xingfu was coming back. The young masters of Luxurious and Limitless were also there to discuss the collaboration. Food King Hara was also coming with them. The people in Golden Beginning were much more familiar with Food King Hara, so they weren't too curious about him. After all, the Queen and Zhenxing shouldn't be this excited just because of a few people, right? When the starships arrived, Queen Angenia and the current boss of Golden Beginning, Zhenxing, personally stood at the entrance to welcome them. The other spaceships that landed one after another didn't elicit much reaction from either of them, even though Xingfu and Food King Hara were among them. When the last aircraft landed, Angenia and Zhenxing had already walked over to it before it even landed. Everyone in Golden Beginning craned their necks to see just who it was that could make two of Golden Beginning's bosses personally welcome them. The aircraft did not seem to be anything special. The hatch opened, and under everyone's expectations, a gray cat jumped out. It stuck out its fat butt and stretched its body. After scanning its surroundings, it calmly squatted down and licked its paws. Everyone! It didn't take long for a group of people to walk out of the spaceship. Angenia and Genshin immediately went up to greet them. Silen stared at the two people who were walking towards them with uncontrollable excitement. Angenia might have been arrogant and domineering when she was younger, but right now, even though she didn't look old on the surface, her mental state had grown to a whole new level. She might be smiling gently, but her aura was inviolable. Genshin, on the other hand, exuded the aura of a superior under Angenia's tutelage. It had nothing to do with his own strength. If there was anything strange about them, it would be their appearances. Genshin's sideburns had turned white, and Angenia looked more like brother and sister than mother and son. You're Genya's disciple, Silen? Angenia asked in a trembling voice. It's a pleasure to meet you. Silen saluted her. Angenia had seen this salutation before. Genya had taught her this before, and he said that it was a custom from his hometown. Angenia's gaze fell on Silen's left thumb. The familiar curly leaf pattern on it brought tears to her eyes. Then, everyone saw their queen holding a young man's hand with reddened eyes. No one knew what she was saying. It's so strange. Is he an illegitimate child? No, an illegitimate grandchild? But young Master Xingfu and boss Genshin didn't seem angry at all. Seeing how excited Angenia was, Genshin reminded her, "Let's talk when we get back." "That's right. You've come from afar, so we must treat you well." The queen ordered her subordinates to take care of the others while she led Silen into her private car. Huimao followed suit. Silen felt goosebumps rising all over his body when he heard the way he called her second grandma and mistress. Genshin also got into Angenia's car. As for the others, they didn't look like they were going to take care of them themselves. Xingfu scratched his head awkwardly as he watched the flying car fly away. Seriously, their own son and grandson were here, but the two of them actually ignored them. After saying goodbye to Fun Yuzhua and Punius, Xingfu had someone drive him to catch up to them. Hara was used to this kind of cold treatment, and he could understand Angenia and Genshin's feelings, so he didn't mind it at all. Instead, he greeted some of Golden Beginning's acquaintances with a smile. Back at Angenia's residence, Silen took out the necklace and badge and handed them to Angenia and Genshin. "My master told me to give these to you." Genshin accepted the badge. It didn't have any buttons or pins, but it stuck to his clothes. If it came into direct contact with his skin, it would turn into a curly leaf pattern that looked like a tattoo. Angenia, on the other hand, stared at the necklace in her hand in a daze. Afterward, Silen injected Genshin with the plant hormone extracted from the Fuji tree. He also told Genshin and Angenia a few things to take note of before leaving the rest for them. Xingji wasn't here right now, so Angenia would be the one to administer the injection. Genshin's genetic evolution process was a lot calmer than Xingfu's. Xingfu's reaction was a little bigger than Xingfu's, because he was a little special at the time. After the stimulated evolution, Genshin's gene rank remained at rank B, but his appearance had changed a lot. Before this, Genshin was a middle-aged man with graying temples, but after the injection, he had become a young man in his prime. Genshin was very happy about this change. After all, the boss of Golden Beginning couldn't be too weak. Previously, many people had objected to Genshin taking over because he was too weak. After this, he believed that those people would calm down a little. Angenia was a little disappointed that Genya couldn't come back, but it was great news to know that he was alive and doing very well. Angenia felt a lot of the frustration that had been plaguing her for decades. "Oh right, Silen, you're the captain of Vanguard now, right? I have a gift for you. I believe it will be of great help to you." Angenia summoned one of her subordinates and told them to bring the gift over. "Are you talking about that armor?" Genshin looked at Angenia. They only had 5 sets of that armor in their possession right now. He, Angenia, Xingfu, Xingji, and Prisa each had a set. How could they possibly have an extra? Unless Angenia wanted to give Silen her own or Xingfu's. Xingfu hadn't used the armor yet because his constitution was too weak to handle it before. But now that Xingfu's genes had improved, armor? Sillin was curious. He had seen protective suits and armor that could be used in outer space, but if both Angenia and Genshin thought so highly of it, there had to be something special about it. A moment later, Angenia's subordinate returned with a box. Angenia took out a strange garment that seemed to be made of a transparent liquid that was connected to a pair of pants. We only received 5 sets, and this is mine. I'm giving it to you now. Just as Sillin was about to refuse, Angenia stopped Sillin and looked at Genshin. Little Xing, show me. Genshin rose to his feet and took off his jacket. Then, Sillin watched as a transparent liquid suit similar to the one in Angenia's hand appeared on the surface of Genshing's body. The liquid then solidified and enveloped Genshin in a suit of silvery white armor. He was fully armed from head to toe. Genshin took out a laser knife and slashed at the armor's arm, but it didn't leave a single mark. The curve of the armor was natural when it ran and jumped. Once the demonstration was over, the helmet on the head of the armor was removed to reveal Genshing's face. Genshin looked very excited. After all, the armor felt much better after his genes evolved. This armor can be used in outer space. I'm sure you'll discover its other benefits after you try it out. Also, after you put it on, it can connect with your nerves, and you can control its form. You can hide inside your body or appear as armor. Angenia handed the armor to Sillin. Sillin took the armor and looked at it carefully. It was indeed very special. When he touched it, he felt like he could communicate with it. The person who made this armor was quite amazing. However, when Sillin observed the armor, he noticed an inconspicuous print on it. This print? You recognize this print? Angenia was very observant. Yes. It's a pity. After a pause, Sillin suddenly asked, Do you have a member of this family here? Angenia hesitated for a moment, but she still nodded. Can I go see him? Sillin asked. Genshin opened his mouth, but didn't say anything. He would let Angenia decide. After a moment of silence, Angenia replied, Sure. I'll take you there now. Right here? That's great. We can solve this problem together. Sillin thinks. He put away the armor and followed Angenia out. Genshin followed closely behind. He also wanted to know what Sillin knew. There was a courtyard not far from Angenia's residence. The courtyard was surrounded by some strange machines. When Sillin arrived, Hara's loud laughter came from the courtyard. Angenia opened the door and Sillin saw the person inside. Hara was decorating a cake with fruits. Opposite Hara was a young man about 14 or 15 years old. He was holding his chin with one hand and dipping some cream from the unfinished cake into his mouth with the other. His eyes were curved in a smile. Hearing the sound of the courtyard door opening, the young man looked over. Facing the shining sunlight, Sillin saw the silvery white color reflected in his metallic gray pupils. The pure metallic gray pupils and the reflection of the silver light. You had told Sillin that the young man in front of him was a pure-blooded member of the Shi family. However, this youth's hair was white instead of the metallic gray that you had said most members of the Shi clan possessed. Chapter 335. The young man shot the newcomers a glance before nodding at Angenia. Then, his gaze paused for a moment on Sillin before settling on Huimao. Huimao was also staring at the young man. Huimao remembered Ayu telling him about the Shi family's characteristics and how he criticized Shi Kai for being unorthodox in private. Ayu said that the Shi family's authenticity depended on their eyes. The Shi family members had a very special pair of eyes, and the young man in front of him happened to fit the description perfectly. At the time, Ayu was very depressed because he thought that he would never see another authentic Shi family member again. He didn't think that he would still be alive after all. Excited, Huimao patted Sillin with his fat paw and said, A Shi family member? Look, Sillin, it's a Shi family member. An authentic Shi family member, meow. Sillin slapped his paw away and said, I know. Everyone's expressions changed when Hui Mao mentioned the Shi family. The young man was no exception. For a moment, the atmosphere became a little heavy. Even Hara, who never liked to pause when he was cooking, stopped and looked at Silen. This was the second time Hara showed Silen an unsmiling face. Do you know the Shi family, Silen? Angenia asked seriously. Silen shot Angenia and Hara a glance. If it wasn't for his relationship with Genya, they would have killed him to silence him already. I know a Shi family member, Silen replied. Angenia was confused. Even Genya didn't know a Shi family member, and how did Silen know a Shi family member like that? On the other side, the 11th squad was resting at their assigned place when a beautiful maid brought them green tea. Green tea was the most common thing in Golden Beginning, and they were all high-quality green tea. When the beautiful maid passed the tea to Cheto, she glanced at Cheto a few times. Cheto smiled at her, and the maid's face immediately blushed red. Seeing this scene, the members of the 11th Vanguard squad all had a strange look on their faces. Xiao Shang and Carrie winked at each other. Look, our charm can't even compare to a robot's. Cheto ignored Carrie and Xiao Shang who were winking at him. He rose to his feet abruptly and looked at Moon and Sigma who were circling the room. Silen wants you and Shi Kai to meet him. What's the matter? Shi Kai put down the cup and asked. You'll know when you get there. Cheto didn't explain any further. They were stopped by the guards when they were about to leave the house. It was forbidden to roam freely in this place, not to mention that their destination wasn't far from Angenia's residence. However, the man in front of them received the message very quickly. He smiled awkwardly and led the group to the place Angenia told him. Cheto and the others arrived at the courtyard entrance, but the guards only allowed Shi Kai to enter first. Although Shi Kai was puzzled, he knew that Silen was inside, so he didn't say anything. Shi Kai knew that the young man was a member of the Shi family the moment he saw him. Shi Kai's eyes were metallic gray, but they were a little darker than the young man's. Moreover, his eyes didn't reflect the pure silver light of the sun. Regardless, Shi Kai was very happy to see a member of the Shi family who had stayed behind in the League of Stars. My name is Shi Kai. Shi Mu. The young man licked the cream off his hand before asking, May I speak to him in private? Of course. After receiving Angenia's nod, the guards inside the house left, and Shi Mu and Shi Kai entered the house. I didn't expect you to know a member of the Shi family. Angenia smiled. This is good news for you. After all, not everyone can win the Shi family's trust. Hara was deeply moved by Angenia's words. He patted Silen's shoulder and said, Seize the opportunity, but don't tell anyone about the Shi family. It'll only bring you trouble. Seeing Silen's puzzled expression, Angenia said, The Shi family is a very special family. It's almost as if they were born with an extra nerve, and that's why they attract jealousy from others. Moreover, some ambitious people have their eyes set on them. Right now, I only know about 15 members of the Shi family. 10 years ago, the Shi family was ambushed. Although I was friends with them at the time, I didn't dare to offend the government of the League of Stars recklessly. However, the Shi family offered 5 sets of armor in exchange for Shi Mu's safety for 10 years. Shi Mu wasn't even 5 years old at the time, but he was as smart as an adult. Not long after the Shi family was captured by the League of Stars government, a space laboratory they were locked in exploded. Not a single person survived the explosion. Shi Mu's hair turned white overnight after he learned of the news. Can you imagine a child who's not even 5 years old having his hair turn white because of overthinking? At the time, Angenia was shocked. She never thought that something like this could happen to a child who wasn't even 5 years old and was younger than her own grandson. Shi Mu had turned into a contradictory person overnight. The innocent smile he used to have was gone, and his personality seemed to have split into 2 halves. One was bright silver, and the other was cold and dark gray. When Hara met Shi Mu for the first time, he made him a cake named Daybreak. The night was coming to an end, and the dawn was coming. The Shi family had helped Hara before, and although they hadn't given him any benefits before they left, Hara had always been kind to Shimu. Every time he came to Golden Beginning, he would visit Shimu as well as Genshin. Shimu loved sweets, and Hara would bring him a lot of them every time he came to visit. Both Angenia and Hara knew that every member of the Shi family was a genius. Shimu was separated from the rest of the Shi family at the age of 5, and he didn't receive any formal education. The fact that he was able to create all kinds of machines by himself was a testament to his own research. What was even more puzzling was that Shimu was able to make massage chairs for Angenia and food dispensers for Hara, but he didn't know how to make cannons, aircrafts, or airship. Angenia and Hara wouldn't believe that he couldn't do something like that. The 10 years are almost up, and the League of Stars is in chaos right now. The Shi family geniuses scattered throughout the League of Stars are being fought over by every force. There are still Shi family members in the League of Stars, but they are few and far between. Therefore, Silan, you should try to recruit Shimu if you can. Otherwise, he'll become a dangerous weapon in the hands of the other forces, Angenia said. While the people outside were talking about Shimu, Shimu brought Shikai into the house and took out a palm-sized device. Shimu turned on the device, and a square image of about 1 cubic meter appeared in front of them. It looked like the dark background of the universe, but it was dotted with a few specks of starlight. Stars in the sky? Shikai recognized this game. He had played it when he was a child. It was the Shi family's first game, but why did Shimu take it out now? Shimu didn't say anything. He looked at Shikai and tapped a spot on the image. A speck of starlight immediately appeared. Then, Shimu looked at Shikai. Shikai had no choice but to play. After looking at the distribution of the specks on the image, he tapped a spot as well. And so, the two of them continued to play, and more specks of starlight appeared on the image. Stars in the Sky was indeed the Shi family's first game. Every speck of light in the game represented a basic unit, and it was like a part of a whole. It wasn't easy to add parts one by one without destroying the function of the whole. In fact, it might even be necessary to make the whole even more perfect. Shikai thought that he was pretty good at playing Stars in the Sky, and judging from the young man in front of him, he was pretty good at it. The two of them didn't take any breaks during the game at all. It didn't take long for Shikai to tap a spot. He thought that the game was finally over, but before he could say anything, the stars in the sky suddenly shrank and doubled in size. Well, Shikai didn't understand why this was happening. Shimu looked at Shikai in confusion. Of course, a level 2 structure would appear after a level 1 structure is finished. Have you been stuck at level 1 all your life? Shikai. Fine, the ancestors of the Mist Bodhisattva Empire had tricked him again. The level 2 structure was doubled in size from the level 1 structure, and they needed to expand the empty space to continue. Compared to the first level structure diagram, Shikai had to treat the second level structure diagram more seriously. He had to consider the first level structure diagram at every step and think based on it. His speed of drawing wasn't as fast as when he was drawing the first level structure diagram, but Shimu was still as fast as before. Basically, Shikai was pointing out every time Shikai made a move. When the level 2 structure was finally finished, the level 3 structure appeared. Shikai was starting to feel a headache coming on. In the end, Shikai made a mistake during a step in the level 4 structure, and a crack appeared on the stars in the sky. The crack was the chess piece that collapsed the system because of this one mistake. From a mechanical point of view, it was because of this last component that broke down the other component. It's only level 4? Shimu looked disappointed. Shikai was even more disappointed. He hadn't even figured out the kid's strength yet, and he had already lost. It was really a loss of face. It's nothing. It's your first time playing a chain Stars in the Sky, so you're not used to it yet. You'll get used to it. Shimu looked at the completed game. You've been playing the level 1 structure all this time? Yeah. I didn't even know that Stars in the Sky was a chain chess game. Shikai was helpless as well. He had really been tricked. First, it was the original robots that made you feel estranged from him. Now it was the stars in the sky. How much more did he not know? Which branch of the Shi family do you belong to? Shimu asked. There are branches? Shikai was confused. Shimu looked at Shikai with disdain. I really do think you're an imposter. The Shi family has been divided into 3 branches since 1,000 years ago. They were later called the tricolor branch, red, white, and blue. The white branch is still in the Shi family's birthplace. The blue branch is gradually working with other forces in the League of Stars, and the red branch is supposedly leaving. Shikai's heart skipped a beat. Why do you call them blue, white, and red? The light effect. It's based on the fact that the frequency of light reflected by an object changes with its own speed. The light reflected by an object moving away from us is red, just like how the nebula we see here is red because it's moving away from us. The red branch, for example, is called this color because they chose to leave. As for the blue branch, I don't think I need to explain it to you, do I? Shikai nodded. No need. I know which branch I belong to. Red branch, I belong to the red branch. Shimu raised an eyebrow in surprise. When I was young, I heard from my clansmen that there's been no news of the red branch for almost 1,000 years. Rumor has it that they left the League of Stars and went to another galaxy. I wonder if it's true? Shikai was hesitating whether he should tell Shimu about the Mist Bodhisattva Empire, but Shimu spoke up again. I see. It's true. Shimu belonged to the White Branch, and he was the only member of the White Branch he knew. Shikai thought that his branch was miserable enough, but it turned out that the White Branch was even worse. At least his branch was safe in the Mist Bodhisattva Empire, while Shimu's branch had been tortured to this state. The 2 Shi family members chatted here for a while, and the 3 robots who were still standing in front of the courtyard gate heard the voice to let them in. Cheto didn't feel anything, but Moon and Sigma felt a strange sense of familiarity until they were called into the house. The moment they entered, Sigma and Moon's attention was immediately drawn to the chessboard of stars that hadn't disappeared yet. Stars. It's stars. It's been a long time since I've seen a chain of stars. While Moon and Sigma were circling the chessboard, they noticed Shimu, who was standing next to Shikai. The 2 robots froze. While Moon and Sigma were studying Shimu, Shimu was also observing the 2 robots. It was true that the Shi family members were capable of building robots like these, so they should have at least reached the 7th level of stars. But why had they fallen from grace when they were so talented? Why was Lan Ji, the one everyone thought to be the least talented of them all, still doing so well? Ahem, have you played stars before, Sigma? Shikai broke the silence and asked. Of course. Sigma looked very excited. We used to play it all the time. Did you play Stars Chain? A single level at that? Of course it's a chain. Stars Chain is supposed to be connected to each other. Why else would it be called Stars Chain? Sigma asked in confusion. Ahem, I got it. Shikai shot Moon and Sigma a glance before asking, what level are you guys at? Hearing this question, Moon lowered his head and twirled his fingers with an embarrassed expression. I only went down to the 6th level. The 6th level and only? Before Shikai could vomit blood, Sigma, who was standing beside Moon, exclaimed, What? You're able to reach the 6th level already? I'm still stuck at the 5th level. I really am the dumbest. Shikai. How could he, a player who had only reached the 4th level? You're all in the hunter regiments right now? Shimu interrupted their conversation. Yeah. Why don't you join us? We can play Stars Chain more often that way. Both Moon and Sigma were looking forward to it. Shimu didn't give them a direct answer. When they came out, Shimu saw Cheto and asked Shikai in secret, Who made that robot? Shikai looked surprised. You can tell it's a robot at first glance? It's hard to tell without looking closely. If the robot's creator played Stars Chain, he could have reached the 7th level at the very least. The 7th level? Shikai nodded when he thought of something. He's capable of that. How could a person who could replace Guan Feng in Black Viper be weak? The robot's creator is Silen, the captain of the hunter squad I'm in right now. I can trust him. That night, Shimu stayed in his room alone and played Stars Chain with himself. It was something he had done frequently for the past 10 years. When the first glimmer of dawn arrived, the Stars Chain was already densely packed on the chessboard. A normal person's vision would have blurred if they looked at it, but Shimu still stared at the chessboard intently. He would spend a minute or two before making a move. The chessboard was at the 8th level, and Shimu was trying to break through to the 9th level. In fact, he could have reached the 8th level 2 years ago, but he never succeeded in breaking through to the 9th level. 2 minutes later, Shimu tapped a spot on the chessboard. He knew he'd failed again the moment his finger touched the chessboard. Sure enough, after the new point appeared, a spiderweb-like crack appeared, covering the entire chessboard. Shimu sighed softly and dispersed the chessboard with a wave of his hand. Then, he got up and started packing his things. The first thing Silen saw when he woke up was Shimu. "I want to join you." Shimu cut straight to the point. Silen was surprised to hear this. He had considered the possibility of recruiting Shimu into his team, but he didn't expect Shimu to deliver himself to his doorstep. Angenia and Hara had told him last night that he should take the initiative against someone like Shimu, or he wouldn't have told them his thoughts. But before Silen could put his plan into action, Shimu came running to him on his own. "You'll have to go through a trial before you can join the squad, and you'll need enough votes from the other squad members," Silen said. "That was the old rule of Vanguard B squadrons. Angenia gave you her armor, didn't she?" Shimu asked instead of answering Silen's question directly. He sounded very certain. Silen didn't deny it. "Yes, she gave me her own set." "Give them back to her. Those 5 sets of armor belong to the broad spectrum. As long as one's physical fitness is up to standard, anyone can use them. However, for those who have high requirements and often have high-risk missions, the armor's compatibility with the nerves isn't enough. Angenia and the others don't have to fight often, but you do. So, you don't need armor that doesn't suit you." Silen looked at Shimu and smiled. "All right." Shimu didn't say it out loud, but the underlying meaning was clear. "I'll give you armor that suits you better." Welcome to the 11th Squad of Vanguard. Moon, Sigma, and Shikai were very happy to see Shimu join the 11th Squad. After joining the 11th Squad, Shimu assumed the role of Shikai's cousin. Shimu listed out a few materials to make the armor. Angenia had given most of the materials to Silen, so he didn't need to look for them himself. There were also a few rare materials that Angenia didn't have, or Golden Beginning didn't have much in stock to begin with. However, Shimu knew the general location of the rare materials he needed. After staying at Golden Beginning's headquarters for 3 days, Silen and the others left to search for the materials Shimu mentioned. Angenia sent someone to see them off. After all, anyone who didn't have a navigation system in Sector S would be treated as an invader. Chapter 336. "Why don't you stay for a couple more days?" Huimao asked Silen while eating the dried fish Hara had given him. "Limitless, Luxury, and Jean Shua are going to discuss a partnership. I'm sure they'll be wary of us if we stay." "There's a secret?" Huimao licked his paws. "It's not like we care." "Yeah, you only care about the fish biscuits Hara's Smiling Face Company is about to produce, you glutton." Under Huimao's suggestion, Hara had decided to have his Smiling Face Company produce pet food. First up was the cat food fish biscuit. Huimao had even acted as his consultant once, and the fee he received was enough to feed Huimao for a very long time. Hara had given Silen a lot of things before they left, so they didn't have to worry about food for a very long time. Tang Kukikia's candy, Huimao's dried fish, and Shimu's desserts were all prepared. Their food warehouse was full to the brim. Hara had also given Silen his personal contact method. It was also a hint that they were going to form a partnership. Silen calculated for a moment and noted that there was still some time before Songba Leruo's meeting with Vanguard's executive. Before the meeting, Silen hoped to obtain Shimu's armor and implant super AI into the starship. Silen couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was going to happen during the meeting, so it was always better to make sure everything was in order before the meeting. The 11th Squad had collected 80% of the materials on Shimu's list. As of late, the 11th Squad had come to the vicinity of Sector M. Sector M was famous for its mineral companies. But most of them were monopolized by them. Right now, Silen and the others were at the edge of Sector M. This place was privately owned before the League of Stars' uprising. But after the League of Stars' uprising and a large number of people had fallen, the big companies in Sector M had retreated a little deeper into the center of the sector. It was like a turtle withdrawing its head and feet into its shell to protect itself. Because of this area was half empty. After detecting the mineral deposits, Cheto and Moon took care of the monitors the mine owners had left on the planet. Together with Carrie and the others, the 7 Shikai robots that had been upgraded by Shimu's suggestion quickly departed for the planet. Inside the control room, Silen stared at the screen. Kali, Shusag, and the newcomers were mining. The people Silen had brought over from the Mist Bodhisattva Empire had integrated into the group perfectly. After all, they were hunters who often traveled in the universe. Most of their time was spent traveling in the universe, so they would not stay in one place for long. Therefore, for hunter regiments they would recruit good seedlings first and then train them in the future. If they were not good enough, they would deal with them. This was the usual practice of hunter regiments. The good thing was that the people that Silen had brought back were all pretty good, except for the occasional misfit. The mining process went smoothly. After Carrie and the others transported the results back to the starship, everyone sat in the lounge and chatted. Shimu, on the other hand, was eating a big cream cake. "Do you really like desserts that much, Shimu?" Carrie asked curiously. "Because my brain uses up a lot of energy. Desserts can replenish my energy quickly," Shimu answered while eating. Today, he played a game of Chain Stars with Moon and Sigma, and he played with the little chameleon while he was at it. He was surprised that the little chameleon was so smart that it almost made it to the 3rd level. After the game was over, Shimu took a look at Carrie's mining results and made some analysis. It was a lot of brain use. "Oh, I see." Realization dawned on Carrie. "Of course. Why else would I eat so much of this sweet stuff?" Everyone looked at Tang Qiuqiu in unison after hearing Shimu's answer. Tang Qiuqiu, who was chewing on her jelly beans, froze for a moment. Then, she said angrily, "I just like it. I just like it. What's so strange about it?" After that, Tang Qiuqiu walked up to Carrie with a gun slung over her back and said, "Come on, let's fight one-on-one in the gaming room." Carrie scratched his head and followed her out. "What happens if I lose?" "The loser has to help Whis clean up the food crumbs." "I'd rather clean up the Miantuan's shit or brush Xuecho's fur." Shimu passed a statistical report to Silen after he was done eating. "This is the statistics of the ores we've mined." Silen accepted the report and noticed that only 4 materials were missing. Shimu had noted the places where they could be found. The mining companies in Sector M may be able to buy these materials, but there's one thing we have to look for: liquid metal LS-57. It's not easy to find. There are a lot of isotopes in LS. Why use LS-57? It's the best alloy for perfect fusion. Got it. But I can't find a single mining company in Sector M that sells LS-57 publicly, Silen said. None? Shimu thought for a moment. Let's check Luminous Flower. If I remember correctly, they have the most liquid metal in stock, and their stockpile of LS-57 exceeds their sales. If there are no accidents, they should have a surplus after 10 years. Even if they don't have LS-57, I'll see if I can find some other suitable liquid metal. Shimu wasn't too happy with the lack of LS-57. He didn't like to make do, and he didn't like to look for a substitute. But since Silen was in a hurry, he had no choice but to look for a substitute. Haven't you been at Golden Beginning all this time? How do you know about Luminous Flower's liquid metal stockpile? Yudi asked. Shimu shot him a "you're an idiot" look before answering. I went there with my clansmen when I was 4. Of course I remember. 4 years old, he could still remember everything that happened back then. Most importantly, no 4-year-old would pay attention to a company's stockpile and sales volume, not to mention that it was liquid metal, not toys and delicious food. Silen searched for Luminous Flower's location on Sector M's star map. Fortunately, it wasn't far from here. Luminous Flower was one of the bigger mining companies in Sector M, and after the League of Stars fell into chaos, all the major companies in Sector M joined together to form the Mining Alliance of Sector M. This way, even if the League of Stars were to make a big move elsewhere, they could work together to protect themselves. Not even the army or the hunter regiments would dare attack them openly. A deal was fine, but if you wanted to attack Sector M, they would follow the policy of dying in glory than in dishonor. There was another characteristic of the people of Sector M. Kindness and justice could only be applied to merchants like Lung and the others if a deal failed. As for the people of Sector M's mining companies, they would ignore you the moment a deal failed, and they would turn hostile faster than Huimao chewing biscuits. One moment they were smiling and negotiating a deal with you, and the second the deal failed, their expressions would change. That was why the people who often came to Sector M to trade were already used to their style. If a mine owner was still smiling when a deal had not been completed, it would instead scare people. People couldn't help but wonder if the mine owner was planning to kill someone and rob them of their goods, or something. Moreover, the people of the mines were incredibly strong, no matter how small or strong they looked. Therefore, most people who went to the mines to trade didn't dare to play any tricks, such as stealing ores when they weren't paying attention. If they did, they would definitely get beaten up. Amputating an arm or a leg was just a minor injury, and there were plenty of people who killed the thief outright. This was because there was a rule in Sector M that allowed the thief to kill the thief. Silen and the others came to one of Luminous Flower's big market. There were all kinds of mines everywhere, including solid and liquid metal ores, energy ores, decorative crystals ores, and so on. The houses in the mines looked very casual, and there were very few buildings that were higher than 3 stories. The buildings looked very simple, and the people in the small shops in the mines looked like workers at the bottom of society. But in reality, every single one of them had enough money to buy a small starship. That metal mine looks pretty good. Carrie's eyes lit up as he ran towards a small mining shop. The shop owner, who was sitting on a chair, saw that a customer had arrived. He rose to his feet with a smile and introduced the ore he had his eyes on to Carrie. The metal extracted from this ore is of pretty good quality and is very hard. You're hunters, aren't you? The metal contained in a high-quality wrist blade used by hunters can be found in this mine. Here, let me show you the finished product. The shop owner pointed at a metal block that was half a meter tall standing at the side of the shop. This is the metal alloy extracted from the ore. It has a naturally high hardness ratio, so you don't have to mix other metals into it. It's very hard, so you can easily deal with shell-type exotic beasts. If you don't believe me, you can try it yourself. It's free if it's not hard enough. As soon as the shop owner finished speaking, Carrie was about to pull out his blade to give it a try. However, a sharp, ear-piercing sound assaulted their eardrums. Squeak, 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 everyone turned around. They saw Huimao sticking out his fat butt and digging at the metal block. He was happily digging, leaving a scratch mark on the metal block. Who? What are you doing? Carrie covered his ears and shouted. Huimao tilted his head and said while digging, "Let me tell you, This thing is very good for sharpening my claws, ahem. Sillin held back his laughter, and said to the shop owner, who had a constipated expression on his face, "You mean you want us to buy this alloy to make hunting knives to deal with exotic beasts?" When he said exotic beasts, Sillin glanced at Huimao. His meaning was clear. "You want us to use this kind of knife to hunt?" The shop owner's face turned from red to green, then from green to black. He had just said, "Go ahead and try, it's free if it's not hard enough." While the shop owner was in a dilemma, an aircraft flew into the mine and landed in an empty area. The aircraft did not look eye-catching, but anyone who could land directly in the mine had to be from Luminous Flower. Aircrafts like this appeared every day, so the owners of the mining area shops didn't move at first. But when the hatch of the aircraft opened and they saw the person walking out, all of them jumped up and ran over as if they had been poked in the buttocks by a mineral crystal. When Xiao Shang and Ba Dao saw the person walking at the front, they quickly hid behind the group. Xiao Shang even pulled Xueqiu in front of him to shield himself. Ba Dao was a step too slow, so he had no choice but to hide behind Shu Sag and Dias, all 6 of his arms pulled back. Chapter 337. A group of people walked out of the spaceplane, led by a young woman. She wore a pair of sunglasses that covered most of her face and a mid-length trench coat over a simple, tight-fitting shirt. Every now and then, the wind that rose from her body accentuated the curves of her body beneath the coat. She didn't look flirtatious, but rather capable and tough. The young woman was followed by a dozen or so bodyguard. Instead of helping the transporters move the goods out of the spaceplane, they followed the young woman and paid close attention to their surroundings. It was hard not to notice them because they were so different from the rest of the mining area. The light reflected off the ores was like a starlit avenue for them. "Hey, young miss. Why are you here in person?" A shopkeeper at the front of the group asked while rubbing his hands together. "What's wrong? Did you do something wrong?" Hua Shi glanced at the man through her sunglasses. "Of course not. I wouldn't dare." The man chuckled. "Welcome to our mines, young miss. Welcome to our mines, young miss." The other shopkeepers hurriedly chimed in. "Cut the crap. If I catch any of you slacking off or breaking the rules, I'll confiscate your goods without mercy." Hua Shi walked along the avenue and looked around at the ores around her. Every now and then, someone would report to her about their recent progress, but she didn't say anything. However, when she saw Sillin's group, she frowned and slowed down. Someone moved closer to Hua Shi and whispered something into her ear. "Vanguard?" Hua Shi looked at Sillin's group again. Then, her gaze suddenly froze for a moment before she strode toward them. Sillin was puzzled when he saw Hua Shi walking toward him. He had noticed Xiao Shang and Ba Dao's unusual behavior, but how did they provoke this young miss? Moreover, Sillin couldn't help but wonder why he felt a sense of familiarity from this young miss. "Xiao Shang! Ba Dao! How dare you hide from me?" Hua Shi angrily pointed at Xiao Shang and Ba Dao, who were hiding behind Xueqiu and Shu Sag. Xiao Shang and Ba Dao felt bitter inside. How the hell did she notice us? As soon as he turned his head, he discovered that a large shiny ore not far away was clearly reflecting their figures. Damn it! A mining factory really wasn't a good place to hide. "Hee, hello, young Miss Hua." Xiao Shang greeted her with a sheepish smile, but he didn't look at Hua Shi or Sillin's eyes. Instead, he looked around at the ores around them. As for Ba Dao, he looked down at Snowball's chubby soles and counted how many hairs there were on its soles. Hua Shi was infuriated when she saw that the two of them didn't seem to want to talk. Every time she tried to pry information out of their mouths, she couldn't get anything out of them. "Where's Sillin?" Hua Shi cut to the chase. The rest of the 11th squad turned to look at Sillin at the same time. Shu Sag and Carrie especially had dirty looks on their faces. Their thoughts were probably heading in a direction that was not suitable for children again. Xiao Shang and Ba Dao turned their heads. This wasn't their fault, it was everyone's fault. They didn't say anything. Noticing everyone's reaction, Hua Shi shifted her gaze back to Silen. She scanned Silen from top to bottom, then back up again. What is she looking at? Sigma asked. She's looking at the essence through the phenomenon, Yu replied seriously. Hua Shi took off her sunglasses. She wasn't used to the light reflected off the ore crystals, so she narrowed her eyes and stared at Silen. You're Silen? The former Duance Silen, that bastard Shadow X? The moment Hua Shi mentioned Shadow X, Silen immediately remembered why he felt a sense of familiarity. One smile kill. During the sector championship at Seven Lights, Silen had run into a duo from another famous school, the Billy family. They were the dual-blade Lu Yewu and the dual-gun One Smile Kill. He didn't expect One Smile Kill to be the young miss of Luminous Flower. As expected, there were plenty of people of status in famous schools. Very good, it really is you. Hua Shi had been frustrated ever since she lost to Shadow X. Later on, she accidentally learned some insider information and investigated Koi behind the Smile and Eight Claw. However, she couldn't find any trace of Silen, and her search was delayed due to some other reasons. However, every time she ran into Xiao Shang and Ba Dao, they kept their mouths tightly shut. She couldn't force any information out of them at all. This time, she finally caught them. Fight me again, Silen. This time, we'll fight for real, not through a virtual platform. Shusag repeated in a low, despicable voice. Fight for real, however, only the people closest to him could hear what he said. Carrie, Diaz, and the others were trying so hard to hold back their laughter. Puzzled, Chiefing bit his finger. It was a habit he hadn't changed yet. He liked to bite his finger whenever he was thinking. He was just about to ask when Tang Qiuqiu smacked him with the barrel of her gun. Kids shouldn't ask questions like that. Silen paused for a moment before asking, Do you have LS-57? LS-57. Hua Shi thought for a moment before taking out a wristband device and checking it. We do, but we're not selling them. They're our own stock. We do have some LS-56 though, and they're cheaper than LS-57. They're new, so they're of good quality. I only want LS-57. Hua Shi frowned again. Luminous Flower wouldn't sell the LS-57 they had for themselves. Even though they couldn't use it right now, there was no telling when they might come in handy. After all, it was better to keep a few tricks up their sleeves in the current environment. So you're saying you won't fight me if you don't have LS-57? Silen didn't answer. His silence was a tacit admission. The bodyguards behind Hua Shi flexed their muscles. The young miss was clearly angry, and it was probably time for a fight. She was a hunter, and a vanguard hunter at that. She wasn't easy to deal with. Cully and the others noticed the bodyguards behind Hua Shi, so they exchanged a glance and took a few steps forward to form a formation. This would make it easier for them to defend themselves in a situation where they were outnumbered. The atmosphere froze for a moment. The shop owner felt cold sweat beading on his forehead. Oh no, the young miss is angry. If she's angry, his shop's going to be docked. Hua Shi waved a hand and gestured for the bodyguards to stay put. Meanwhile, Silen also made a hand signal, telling Carrie and the others to disengage from battle mode. Hua Shi was just about to continue negotiating when her communicator rang. It was an urgent, encrypted message. She gestured to the bodyguard next to her and rushed to a private room in the store. She looked like she was contacting someone as she walked. It seemed that this call involved some sort of secret, and it wasn't convenient for outsiders to know about it. After Hua Shi left, Silen looked at Xiao Shang and Ba Dao and waited for their explanation. Xiao Shang shrugged. That young miss is probably traumatized by her terrible loss in the sector championship. She's been looking for you for a long time now, but she never found you. Then, she somehow found out that there's a guy named Silen in the 6th division. She started investigating, and she ended up finding me and Ba Dao. We didn't sell you out. Xiao Shang hurriedly tried to clear his name. If she can bring out the LS-57, I don't mind playing with her, said Carrie. Silen ignored their teasing. He noticed that Huimao's ears were perked up and its eyes were glowing. It was rubbing its paw against the metal block a moment ago. Based on Silen's understanding of the cat, it was eavesdropping on Hua Shi's communicator. It had to be something good. Huimao flicked its ears and scurried over to Silen's shoulder. That woman seems to be in some kind of trouble, Silen. They're communicating with each other using a secret code. I don't know what it is, but I think they need our help. That's why we can extort as much as we can, including the LS-57. Weiss had just finished speaking when Hua Shi walked out of the room. She didn't look too good, and this was under the condition that she was doing her best to restrain herself. It was obvious that she was suppressing her impatience from the tightness of her facial muscles. Compared to the one smile kill from the sector championship a few years ago, Hua Shi was a lot more mature now. Let's talk. It's not about the competition. We need to talk about the LS-57 you need. Hua Shi ordered her bodyguards to clear the area. Only Hua Shi, her bodyguards, and Silen's group remained in the area. I have a job for you. Do you want to take it? If you do, we'll give you all of Luminous Flower's remaining LS-57. Silen didn't respond immediately. Tell me about it. Luminous Flower and Golden Willow are working together on a mining project. We're transporting a batch of rare ores to the main company's territory, but we ran into some problems along the way. The transport ship is currently half out of control and has deviated from its original course. It'll pass by the planet's borders soon, and I hope you can assist us in bringing the people and goods out. Of course, we won't let you take the risk alone. Luminous Flower will send our men to retrieve the people and goods. All you need to do is take care of some things inside the transport ship. What things? A type of biochemical beast. Those who are parasitized by those biochemical beasts will be mutated and become completely controlled by the biochemical beast. How many are there? I'm not sure. If Hua Shi wasn't sure, then there had to be a lot of them. Silen smiled. It's not just things. We hunters deal with biochemical beasts a lot, and the kind you're talking about is very dangerous. It's not like we need your help. We're just offering you a job. Is that so? But you don't have enough manpower right now, and your reinforcements won't be able to make it in time, will they? How much help can these miners and shopkeepers give you? Hua Shi narrowed her eyes. Anyone who knew Hua Shi knew that every time she narrowed her eyes like this, it was a sign that she was suppressing her anger. What do you want? Silen handed her a list of materials she might need after they found the LS-57. It wasn't much, but it was hard to find. Are you kidding me? Hua Shi clenched the list in her hand. Do you really think your team is worth these things? Allow me to remind you that your team isn't even a fleet. It's not up to you to say whether it's worth it or not. You didn't think you'd lose like that either. Silen's words caused Hua Shi's calm to crumble. Ever since she lost, she would subconsciously pause for a long time to check if her gun was still intact before she fired. A pause like that was fatal to a gunner. Otherwise, Hua Shi wouldn't have kept looking for Silen to get rid of the shadow in her heart. I hope it's worth it. Hua Shi turned around and ordered her bodyguards to prepare the contract. Huimao jumped down from Silen's shoulder and ran to the metal block that he had scratched so many times. Creak! The shrill screech made everyone's hair stand on end. It was like someone had stuffed a chunk of ice between their teeth. It was so cold and painful that they wanted nothing more than to pass out. Hua Shi's eyes twitched when she saw what was happening. She waved a hand and said, "Add that metal block to the contract as well." Huimao grinned from ear to ear when he got the information he wanted. "You're such a good person, pretty sister," Hua Shi snorted. "This pet of yours is much better at talking than the rest of you." Hua Shi noticed that the 11th squad was staring at her strangely the moment she finished speaking. Chiefing bit his finger before asking Tang Qiuqiu, "Isn't Weiss over 200 years old? Why is he calling that woman big sister? Is she really that old?" "Hua Shi, what do you mean, really old? If she didn't need their help, Hua Shi would have flipped out a long time ago. She didn't want to spend another second with these people. All she wanted to do was sign the contract and leave as soon as possible. Silen asked the other squad members for their opinion before signing the contract, and they all agreed to accept the mission. Moreover, Carrie and the others were already rubbing their palms together in anticipation. For hunters, this kind of mission was very common, but Carrie and the others had not participated in this kind of mission since the incident with the 6th B Squadron. Their hands were itching after a long time, so they were very excited when they heard that there was a mission like this, even if it was very dangerous. This was how hunters grew up. Before signing the contract, Silen added, "I hope we can get our hands on the LS-57 first." Shimu had mentioned this to him earlier. Hua Shi only hesitated for a moment before nodding in agreement. However, she only agreed to give them one crate in advance. The rest would be delivered to them after the mission was over. After the agreement was signed, the two parties split up and went their separate ways. Hua Shi told him when the transport ship would arrive at the planet's periphery and told him to be prepared. After Hua Shi returned to her spaceplane, one of her bodyguards asked, "Miss, why did you agree to sign the contract with those hunters? They're just a new B squadron from Vanguard, and they can't compare to the other B squadrons. It's not worth it." Someone who could speak to Hua Shi like this had to be someone special in Luminous Flower. He was transferred from Luminous Flower's main company to assist Hua Shi, so Hua Shi respected him a little. Hua Shi shook her head. "They're Vanguard's hunters, so they're definitely more experienced than our miners. Plus, we can't afford to lose this mission. We can't afford it." Inside the 11th Squad's starship, Silen was discussing the mission with Yudi and the others. "That's all the information we've gathered for this mission. What do you think?" Silen told them everything he learned from Hua Shi before turning to the others. "It can't be as simple as she's making it out to be. If it's just a shipment of rare goods, the young miss of Luminous Flower shouldn't be so concerned about it. Also, from the way she speaks and the way her body language subconsciously shows, I think she's more concerned about someone or someone on the transport ship." "The cargo is just a cover," Shusag said. He used to serve in the Mist Bodhisattva Empire's military, so he had some observation skills. Yudi told them everything he learned. Luminous Flower and Golden Willow are working together to develop a rare mine, but just like Shusag said, it's not enough to make Hua Shi as anxious as she is. Silen nodded. "Either way, we need to be careful during this operation. We told you that we're only here to help, not to risk our lives. The most important thing is to protect ourselves." It was at this moment Tico walked over and passed 2 boxes to him. Both boxes were filled with syringes. "These are the 2 broad-spectrum antibodies you mentioned. I'll start developing them after the operation is over." Silen accepted the boxes and handed out 2 syringes to everyone. After confirming the operation plan and assigning the mission, Silen checked the time. It was about time. He waved the 2 syringes in his hand and looked at everyone. "Just to be safe, I had Tico synthesize these 2 antibodies. For now, we'll start with the primary antibodies. If you get bitten or scratched, we'll start with the secondary antibodies. At the very least, you'll be able to delay the spread of the virus. Once the antibodies are ready, we'll be able to treat them completely. Also, make sure the parasites don't get into your body." After explaining the precautions, Silen asked, "Is there anything else you want to ask?" "No." The group of people was eager to give it a try. "Then let's get ready." "Wait a moment, Silen." Shimu, who hadn't shown up until now, walked over and handed a box to Silen. He was listening to the operation plan and arrangements through his communicator. Silen had seen a box like this before, so he knew what was inside. Angenia had given it to him before, but Silen had returned it to her later on. "You're done already?" Silen was surprised. Although he had gathered most of the materials, he didn't expect Shimu to act so quickly. Shimu shook his head. "It's just a preliminary test. There are many things I haven't perfected yet. Time is of the essence, so I didn't have time to do more detailed tests. You can use it for now. Just one. Just one. All right, I got it. Scylla took the box. I'll leave the rest to you. Understood. I'll do my best since I've joined the 11th squad. Leader, hurry up. Luminous Flowers people are making their move. Carrie urged from the other side of the passageway. Scylla gestured to Carrie and told them to go to the spaceplane first. He took the suitcase and walked into the warehouse that was closer to the spaceplane. 10 seconds later, he came out again and nothing could be seen. Chapter 338. Luminous Flowers people were already waiting at the designated location. According to Hua Xiao, the transport ship would pass through this area after it changed its course, and it wouldn't stop there. They had to get the people and cargo out of the ship at the designated location. Once they were out, Luminous Flower would destroy the entire transport ship. Therefore, they didn't have much time left. Communication with the transport ship had been going on and off, and it was getting harder and harder to get in touch with the people on the other side. By the time Hua Xiao received the news, only a third of the people on the transport ship were still alive. There were probably less than 100 survivors in this period of time. Who knew how many would be left by the time they finally boarded the transport ship? Scylla glanced at Hua Xiao. She was anxious, but she was still able to suppress her emotions. Their target should be fine. That's the latest news. I don't know anything else. That's all I know about the bioweapon. Hua Shi relayed the latest information she learned from the people on the transport ship to Scylla. Even then, they still didn't know much. Due to the urgency of the situation, Luminous Flower didn't have a lot of antidotes on hand. Hua Xiao had to buy some from Scylla. Just like the antidotes Callie and the others used, she injected the first antidote and carried the second antidote with her. "They're here," Moon said. A dot of light appeared on the screen. It was none other than the transport ship Hua Shi had mentioned. Hua Xiao had already sent Scylla the general layout of the transport ship. After some discussion, they confirmed the entry point. Luminous Flowers people and Scylla's group boarded the ship together. As the transport ship drew closer and closer, they could see the strange signal lights on it. The area around the command center was pitch black, and there were also signs of a bombing. Most likely, it was the result of a battle against the bioweapons. "What's the situation inside the transport ship?" Scylla asked. Moon sent the scan results to them. "Everything looks normal. You won't need a respirator. You can remove your respirator once you're inside." The respirator could be removed, but the protective suits were mandatory. One reason was to prevent infection from the bioweapon's blood, and the other was to prevent unforeseen circumstances. "All right, let's follow the original plan." Scylla made a hand gesture, and the spaceships that had left the original starship gradually approached the transport ship. Some spaceships from Luminous Flower's starship also flew over. There was no need for Scylla and the others to open the transport ship's hatch. After the first group of Luminous Flower's members arrived, Scylla and the others boarded as well. There were no parasites around this login point for the time being. From this entrance there was a main path, but it didn't take long before they found Three Forks. "Where is he?" Scylla looked at Hua Shi. Hua Shi fiddled with her communicator for a long time before the call connected. The signal was jammed and there was no clear image. They could only hear some noises. "Yewu, we've reached entry point 3. Where are you?" Hua Shi asked anxiously. "We've been cornered between entry points 3 and 4. We're in a bit of a pickle right now." Hua Shi's tone relaxed a lot when she heard that Hua Shi and the others had already boarded at entry point 3. "We're currently stuck between entry points 3 and 4, but there are too many parasites. We've closed the double gates on both sides to keep the parasites out, and we can't get out ourselves. If you don't come to our rescue soon, we'll all be dead once the parasites break the gates." "All right, wait here. We'll be there right away." Hua Shi looked at the map on the transport ship and found the branching path that led to entry point 4. She urged, "Hurry up." It only took them a few steps before they ran into 2 parasites. They used to be members of the transport ship, but their bodies had undergone obvious changes after being infected by the parasites. Their skin was dark gray, their faces were hideous, and their fingers had completely changed. They looked like the claws of a bird, and there were 3 rows of half-meter-long spikes growing out of their backs. Every spike was so straight that it sent shivers down anyone's spine. Seeing the people coming over, they let out sharp roars that didn't sound like a human's. Moreover, as they shouted, they charged towards the group of people. These parasites were no longer the same people they used to be. They were now parasites, and their blood had deteriorated a long time ago. Their thoughts had become that of a parasite. Hua Shi ordered her men to kill the 2 parasites without hesitation. Luminous Flower's men didn't stop after killing the 2 parasites. Instead, they hurried toward the 3rd and 4th entrances. Sigma and Moon were responsible for collecting the samples and processing the information. Then, they would send the samples to the starship so that Tico and Shimu could synthesize the special medicine as soon as possible. Hua Shi couldn't care less about Silen's group right now. They were a hunter platoon, and they wouldn't listen to her orders. She was in a hurry, and she couldn't afford to let anything happen to that person. As a result, the hunter platoon fell behind the rest of the group. "What's wrong, Silen?" Diaz asked. Silen looked at a passageway that led past the fork. There was a warehouse there. There was a yellow and black symbol on the warehouse's door. It was the high-risk radiation symbol. Hearing Diaz's question, Silen shook his head. "Something's not right." Then, he looked at Cheto and pointed at the warehouse. "Check how many of these warehouses there are, and where they are located." "You suspect that those things are related to this?" Yudi asked while walking. "It's just a suspicion. I need to confirm it. Also, we haven't encountered many parasites at the 3rd entrance so far. Something's not right." There was one more thing that Silen didn't tell Cheto. He had seen those parasites before. He hadn't seen them with his own eyes, but he had read some information about them. They weren't a naturally occurring species. They were born in a laboratory. As for the people behind them, had the competition become this intense? "What's wrong, Silen?" Huimao patted Silen's face with its paw. "Did you suddenly realize something important?" Silen didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked Huimao seriously, "Can you fly in space, Wheeze?" "Of course I can. I have wings now." Huimao raised his chin proudly. "That's different. What's the use of flapping your wings without an atmosphere?" "No, I can fly without flapping my wings. I just need to change my form," Huimao said proudly. "Are you sure?" "Yes. I swear on my fish biscuits." What a vicious oath! After receiving Huimao's reply, Silen said to Diaz and the others, "The situation has changed. We need to move faster and finish this in an hour. If we can't, we need to find a way to get out of here." While he was talking, Luminous Flower's people had already begun firing. By the time Silen's group arrived, the ground was already littered with the parasites' corpses. Hua Shi was contacting the people on the other side of the gate to open it. Hua Shi let out a sigh of relief when she saw that everyone was safe. There were only a dozen or so people left on the transport ship, but Yewu and her target were fine. That was something to be thankful for. Yewu helped an old man out of the gate. Half of the dozen or so people around them were wounded, and some of them were seriously injured. "It's great to see you again," Yewu said to Hua Shi with a smile. Yewu was the twin-blade Lu Yewu who Silen met during the Sector Championship. She was a member of Golden Willow Corporation. Yewu's face was filled with both exhaustion and joy. There were many times when she felt like she couldn't hold on any longer, but she had to wait for help because of the old man beside her. After Hua Shi said a few words to Yewu, she walked up to the old man and said respectfully, "I'm sorry for the fright." The old man smiled and waved his hand. "It's fine. I should be the one thanking you. Now is not the time to catch up. Leave now." Sillin cut them off. Yewu shot Sillin a disgruntled look before turning to Hua Shi. These aren't luminous flowers people, are they? Are they the hunters that you said you found to assist us? I didn't see any of them when I was killing the parasite. They had only just arrived when I came out. Is this how hunters work? Hua Shi was about to explain when one of Luminous Flower's people pointed at the surveillance footage in his hand and said anxiously, "Miss, there are at least 200 parasites heading this way. There are still a lot of them who haven't found their hosts yet." When they came over from Gate 3, they had placed surveillance cameras along the way. Because the surveillance on the transport ship had gone out of control, they could not capture any images. Therefore, they had no choice but to rely on temporary surveillance cameras. "Leave now. We can't stay here any longer." Hua Shi looked at the surveillance footage and the transport ship's layout in her hand. The gate leading to Entry 4 wasn't open yet, and there were still a lot of parasites on the other side. They didn't want to face the main force, coming from Entry 3 either. "Retreat to Entry 5. Hua Shi said. Entry 5 had the least number of parasites, and it was also the closest to the transport ship. "We can't go that way. We're going straight to Entry 4. Sillin rejected Hua Shi's suggestion. "Entry 5 is a dead end. If we're trapped there, we'll be surrounded by the parasites." "What gives you the right to say that?" Yewu asked. She knew that Entry 4 was full of parasites. It would be very dangerous to force their way there. "Do as he says," the old man said. "But," Hua Shi hesitated, "they couldn't afford to take the risk." "You're hesitating yourself, aren't you? If that's the case, then let's do as this young man says. They're experienced hunters, after all." The parasites were getting closer and closer to them. They were running out of time. Sillin gestured to Carrie and the others, and they quickly formed a formation in front of the gate. "Open the gate, you." Chapter 339. "I'm sorry, but the control system here has been inactivated to stop the parasites and bioweapons," Yewu said. The control system on this transport ship had already malfunctioned during the outbreak of the bioweapons. Given the urgency of the situation, the technicians had no choice but to tamper with the control system of the two gates and execute an infinite loop. Therefore, the two gates were always closed regardless of whether they were opened or closed. It was only after Hua Shi and her men arrived that Yewu and the others managed to cut open the gate with their high-energy beam guns. Now the gate was destroyed. If the second gate was destroyed as well, then the bioweapons and parasites coming after them would undoubtedly attack them from both sides. Yewu had considered all of this before, which was why she agreed with Hua Shi's decision to take the nearby fork and head to the fifth gate. Yewu wasn't sure if she should believe Sillin's claim that the fifth gate was a dead end or not. After all, she hadn't ordered any of the technicians to inactivate the infinite loop. Yewu couldn't trust these hunters. She didn't have a good impression of them, and her preconceived notions and the events that had just transpired made her highly suspicious of the hunters Hua Shi had recruited at the last minute. She would have supported Hua Shi's suggestion if it weren't for her. Ignoring Yewu's words, Moon walked up to the gate and reached out a finger to touch the control switch beside the gate. At the same time, the blue bar on Moon's face began to flash. Moon didn't say anything, and neither did Sillin. The other members of the 11th Squad were even less likely to respond. They were preparing to go all out when the gate was opened, so they didn't have the time or the mood to explain themselves. Even seasoned hunters couldn't afford to be careless when dealing with parasitic bioweapons. They had to be extremely careful, stay focused, and adjust their body's condition as quickly as possible. Seeing that no one was responding, Sigma kindly explained, "It can be changed. You just don't have the ability to do so, that's all." Yewu. It was a slap in the face, and an innocent one at that. Yewu's face twitched. She would rather the little robot didn't answer. Diaz took out a long cannon barrel, while Yudi, who was beside Diaz, also took out a slightly smaller cannon barrel. Yewu really wanted to say, We can't use cannons that are too powerful here. If the tunnel was seriously damaged, they would definitely not benefit from it. Instead, they might become a hindrance. However, Yewu thought that these hunters would definitely know about this, so she stopped herself from saying what she was about to say. After Yu gave a signal, Silen raised his left hand and began to count down with his 5 fingers. 5, 4, 3. As Silen retracted his fingers one by one, the surrounding people became abnormally silent. A tense atmosphere lingered around them, and from a certain distance behind them, the cries of the parasites and biochemical beasts could be heard. Huashi glanced at the monitor on her wrist. The parasites were only the size of a fist, but they radiated a dark, oppressive aura. Huashi gulped, took a deep breath, and tightened her grip on her gun. I hope that bastard Silen is right, or else. 2-1. The moment Silen retracted his last finger, the closed gate let out a beep. It wasn't loud, but it sounded like a horn that signaled the start of the battle. The serrated gate opened from the middle, and the moment it was only wide enough for a single bullet to pass through, Tang Kukikyu fired. Dark gray liquid spilled out of the gap. It was a hit. Huashi subconsciously glanced at Tang Kukikyu when she saw this. She knew she couldn't afford to be distracted right now, but she couldn't help but stare at Tang Kukikyu out of curiosity. She had been paying attention to Silen all this time, but Silen wasn't the one who fired the first shot. It was a girl who hadn't even reached adulthood yet who had fired the first shot. Her hand didn't tremble in the slightest. She didn't show any nervousness, excitement, or seriousness. In fact, she didn't even show any other emotion. She did it as naturally as if she was eating a meal. That was how Huashi saw Tang Kukikyu. The gap between the gates grew wider and wider, and the scent of parasites and biochemical beasts assaulted everyone's nostrils. Tang Kukikyu's first shot marked the beginning of the battle. The concentrated firepower prevented the closest group of parasites and biochemical beasts from breaking through the defense line immediately. However, there were too many of them and they were too close to each other. The situation wasn't in everyone's favor. It was at this moment Dias made his move. Instead of the cannonball or energy beam that Yewu had expected, the thing that shot out of the cannon barrel was a metal spear. After the metal spear shot out of the cannon barrel, 3 sharp blades unfurled and spun like a fan. The blades shredded the parasites and biochemical beasts near the center of the tunnel like a meat grinder. The parasites' dark gray blood splattered everywhere, and some of the biochemical beasts that tried to pounce on them were sliced into pieces by the blades. Meanwhile, the rest of the team focused their firepower on the parasites and biochemical beasts near the tunnel walls. Based on the number of parasites, the spinning blades could only cover a range of 10 meters. As they sliced and diced, the blades grew slower and duller. They wouldn't be of much use anymore. Still, 10 meters was enough to complete its mission. Bang 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 bang. 5 icy blue projectiles shot out and exploded 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50 meters away from the team. There was no fire, only a white, mist-like blast. The parasites closest to the 5 projectiles had already turned into ice cubes, and the biochemical beasts weren't much better off. The cryogenic grenade had a radius of 10 meters. Outside of that range, the impact was much smaller. The cold air spread, and under the effect of the ultra-low temperature rapid freeze bomb, the movement of the parasites and biochemical beasts slowed down a lot. Even if the parasites' attack power had increased, they were still normal humans after all. They would still be affected by the temperature, so their movements were much slower. However, the biochemical beasts that were slightly further away from the center of the cryogenic grenade only slowed down for a moment before recovering. Tang Qiuqiu was as sharp as ever. She hadn't stopped shooting all the time, and it was a series of shots that almost never paused either. But at this rate, every shot Tang Qiuqiu made blew up the heads of the parasites, and some of the biochemical beasts that were blown up were almost all shot in the head. Just like Diaz said, she was a natural marksman. Although Ba Dao had 3 pairs of hands, 2 more than the average human, and 6 guns fired at the same time. His efficiency might not be higher than Tang Qiuqiu's. Tang Qiuqiu's steps forward were very steady. She did not even make any dodging movements, because there was a fair fatty beside her. Xueqiu was responsible for the biochemical beasts that pounced on her. These biochemical beasts were faster than the parasites, and they were small and agile. They weren't easy to deal with. If these parasites didn't take measures in time, they would be like these parasites that had completely lost their self-awareness. Don't think that a fatty should be slow. Xueqiu smashed the biochemical beasts that pounced on Tang Qiuqiu one by one. Even if the biochemical beasts were not smashed, they wouldn't be much better off. They would no longer be able to move. Snowball's palms were covered in too much of the gray liquid that belonged to the biochemical beast. Hence, after slapping a biochemical beast that had pounced on it against the tunnel wall, Snowball's palms ground against the tunnel wall. Then, with a swipe, the biochemical beast that had been smashed into a meat patty and its sticky blood was smeared on the tunnel wall. The people who saw this scene could not help but shudder. As for Qifeng, he was still as bloody as ever. After he tore the 17th parasite in half, Hua Shi and the others finally understood that he was no ordinary human. He looked innocent and harmless earlier, especially his eyes. Sometimes they showed a puppy's grievance, and it made people want to take pity on him. Why else would people say that dogs are more likely to win people's sympathy than cats? But who was this person who was killing people even more cleanly than Hua Shi's subordinates? Moreover, Qifeng didn't look innocent or pitiable anymore. His eyes were the eyes of a hunter. They were bloodthirsty and cruel, but they didn't lose their cool. Most surprising of all, he was able to work well with his teammate. He was a very good hunter. He might have some flaws, but he was a very good hunter. The old man protected by Zhuohua and Golden Willow's subordinates commented on Qifeng. Even Sha Rou, who was a little inexperienced at the beginning, had matured a lot by now. She might not be able to achieve the same state of mind as Tang Qiuqiu and Scarlet Wind, but she had done a good job and matured very quickly. You grabbed a parasite that was charging at Sha Rou and scanned it. Then, he electrocuted the parasite with his finger and turned it into charcoal. It was collecting information. This was Moon's professional habit. It was fine if they didn't move, but this kind of close combat was the best way to see a hunter's ability. Even though the 11th squad only had a dozen or so hunters, they were still a force to be reckoned with. Every single member of the 11th squad was a force to be reckoned with. Silen's performance went without saying. The moment Silen opened fire, Hua Shi knew that she was going to lose horribly. Her years of experience and knowledge had taught her that the gap between her and Silen wasn't something she could catch up to. Silen and Tang Qiuqiu had always been recognized as the 11th squad's strongest marksmanship. Why was it called people? It was because Moon and Sigma, 2 non-humans, were confident that they wouldn't lose to Tang Qiuqiu. Cheto, on the other hand, was a non-human. However, Cheto rarely fired a gun, so no one knew who was better between him and Tang Qiuqiu. After the group had moved a bit further, the parasites and biochemical beasts finally appeared in their sight. You was already prepared to close the gate before the parasites and biochemical beasts could reach them. Not only did it block off their pursuers, but it also cut off their retreat path. The only way out now was to break through the gate and approach the 4th entry point. Silen didn't order all of Shikai's robots to follow him. Only 3 of them stayed in stealth mode. Shikai's robots were Silen's trump card, and they couldn't be exposed right now, especially not in front of Sector M's people. Silen's original plan changed a little after he noticed the hidden hand behind the biochemical beast. The League of Stars had its own robot kingdom, and the Robert family's robots were the most famous in the entire League of Stars right now. However, their style was obviously different from Shikai's robot. Exposing them right now would only make things more troublesome. Moreover, Shikai's new robot technology hadn't matured yet, and his research hadn't stabilized yet. Therefore, he had to shelve his idea of using robots to solve the problem for now. Moreover, the people in the squad needed training. Hunters were supposed to kill their way to the top, so they had to rely on themselves and their teamwork more often than not. All of this required real combat. Shooting the parasites was easy. Even though they were much faster and stronger after being mutated, they were still easier to deal with compared to the smaller, faster, and more lethal biochemical beasts. Some people also took advantage of the gap to inject themselves with the secondary resistance medicine. Now, everyone's body was splashed with a dark gray liquid, and some people were also injured. Even if they weren't scratched by the parasites and biochemical beasts, the many germs floating in the air and the blood splashed on them would still infect them with the biochemical beast virus. Therefore, they had to inject themselves with the second resistance. Otherwise, they would start to show symptoms before they even made it out of the passage. Serene, the special medicine is almost done. It'll take half an hour at most, so you don't need to inject yourself with the third resistance, Tico said from the communicator in Serene's ear. Roger that. Serene looked at the time before urging everyone, hurry up. Hua Shi and the others didn't understand why Serene was in such a hurry. The parasites and biochemical beasts wouldn't be able to break through the gate anytime soon. Although they didn't understand why, they still sped up. Some people put away their protective suits, which limited their movement. If they wanted their hands to move faster, they had to do this. The oxygen supply of the breathing mask was not enough to satisfy the people who were doing strenuous exercises, so there were too many limitations. Didn't everyone in the 11th squad put away their protective suits? They couldn't afford to lose, could they? Not to mention, the number of parasites and biochemical beasts had dwindled significantly. There was no need to hold back any longer. The most important thing right now was to finish this as soon as possible and get out of here. Although the protective suits weren't made of armor, they could still delay the biochemical beasts from burrowing into a human's body. For those who weren't wearing protective suits, it wouldn't take more than half a second for an adult parasite the size of a fist to burrow into a human's body. As for the smaller parasites, they wouldn't slow down just because they were still in their infancy. Because of their size, they could burrow into a human's body in less than a quarter of a second. Moreover, the smaller parasites were even harder to notice. A few dark gray protrusions appeared on the bodies of the recently killed parasite. One of them was bigger than the others, and the others were much smaller. The protrusions moved for a moment before burrowing out of the dead parasite's skin. Then, they joined the other biochemical beasts and attacked Serene's group. They're reproducing fast. As expected of a biochemical beast raised as a weapon. Hua Shi was protected by a couple of bodyguards. A group of bioweapons crawled out of the corpses of the dead parasites and charged at them. Hua Shi's group had dwindled considerably. The bodyguard who was protecting them from behind only dealt with the big biochemical beast. He did not notice that there was a small biochemical beast behind the big one. The small biochemical beast was blocked by the big biochemical beast in front of it, and the bullet did not go through the big biochemical beast and hit the small one. This little biochemical beast that had just been born was like a wolf that hadn't seen fresh meat for a long time. It was impatient and thirsty. The bodyguard felt a numbing pain in his abdomen. In that moment, he felt as if he had become one of the parasite. As a bodyguard, he was prepared to die at any moment, especially when he learned about this mission. The victim would be fine as long as they could get the biochemical beast out of their body as soon as possible. But that wasn't going to be easy. The biochemical beasts weren't slow to move inside a person's body, and no one else had the time to get them out of their body. Just as Hua Shi's bodyguard was about to say something along the lines of, "You guys go on ahead and leave me alone, I'll cover the rear," he noticed that someone was already standing in front of him. He looked down and saw 2 fingers 3 centimeters above where the parasite had burrowed into his abdomen. Maybe it was because the image of the parasites in his head had shocked him so much that he didn't even notice when the two fingers had stabbed him. Even his sense of pain was lagging a little. Cheto pulled out the biochemical beast that had crawled into the bodyguard's body. The bodyguard felt like he had just survived a disaster. Solace! Another bodyguard noticed Cheto's injury as well. After taking out a biochemical beast that was charging at them, he asked, "Are you all right?" Solace's face was still a little pale, but the corner of her lips twitched a little. "I'm fine now." The injury Cheto had inflicted on his abdomen was nothing. Solace felt a lot more relaxed now. After all, she wasn't infected, was she? "Thank you," Solace said sincerely. Earlier, they were dissatisfied with the hunters, and then they acknowledged their abilities a little. But now, Solace was grateful for the man who had saved her from becoming one of the parasites. Cheto didn't look at them. Instead, he turned around and looked at the biochemical beasts that had crawled out of the dead bodies one after another. "The captain told me to cover the rear. You guys are too slow." "Solace, can you not say the last sentence?" Cheto's movements were a lot faster. Even if he wasn't using a gun, the movement of his hands was enough to shock Solace and the bodyguards responsible for covering the rear. But that wasn't what shocked them the most. 3 biochemical beasts passed by Cheto and pounced straight at Solace's group. Cheto didn't even look at Solace's group because his back was facing them, nor did he look at the incoming biochemical beasts. He didn't even turn his head. With a wave of his arm, the 3 biochemical beasts that were charging at Solace's group were cut in half. Similar things had happened a couple of times already. What shocked Solace and the others wasn't Cheto's ability to move as if he had eyes on the back of his head, or the fact that he was so fast that only the shadows of his hands could be seen. Instead, it was, why didn't the biochemical beasts attack Cheto instead? Cheto wasn't attacked by the biochemical beasts at all. It was as if they couldn't sense his existence at all. Instead, they set their sights on Solace and the others who were further away from them. Why? This puzzled Solace and the others. However, the current situation didn't allow them to think any deeper. Everyone picked up their pace, and the 4th entry point was getting closer and closer. "Sillin, what you're thinking is happening," Moon said to Sillin. Moon had already detected that a few of the warehouses on the transport ship that were loaded with radioactive energy had been opened, including the ones near the 5th entry point. The biochemical beasts there were starting to mutate. For them, high radiation was like a type of genetic evolution food. Right now, it was estimated that there was a situation where the new replaced the old, and the entire range would be replaced. There was no radioactive energy cabin near the 4th entry point at all, so the biochemical beasts here wouldn't mutate. This was one of the reasons why Sillin had chosen the 4th entry point. The mutated biochemical beasts have replaced the old biochemical beasts and taken over the parasites' bodies. Not only that, the parasites have grown stronger and formed a hard shell on the surface. Worse still, the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 5th, and 6th entry points have all been opened. If I hadn't locked down the 4th entry point, it would have been opened by the tampering program already. Some of the evolved biochemical beasts and parasites have crawled out of the entrances and onto the surface of the transport ship. They aren't afraid of the outer space, so we'll definitely run into them if we get out. Moon had also learned to use the word things to refer to the biochemical beasts and parasites. Moon explained the situation to Sillin. Sillin had already guessed at all of this, which was why Sillin wanted to get out of this place as soon as possible. The longer they delayed, the more parasites and biochemical beasts there would be on the transport ship, and that would be a huge problem for them. Would it be easier to fight against C-rank or A-rank geniuses? Without a doubt, it was much easier to fight against C-rank genotype. Sillin briefly explained the situation to Hua Shi and the others. The number of biochemical beasts near the 4th entry point had decreased, and their main priority now was to figure out a way to leave this place safely. After exchanging a few words with Hua Shi and the others, Silen notified Yudos and Shikai of the plan. Then, he called Moon over. Me, Moon, and Wheeze will head out first. We'll clean up this place. After that, Silen grabbed Hue Mao's ear and said, "Wake up. Come with me. Let's get to work." Chapter 340. By the time Silen finished speaking and turned around, his body had already begun to transform. His entire body was covered in a layer of black armor. Even his face was covered in a layer of protective helmet-like armor. Black, pure black. A solemn and mysterious aura, a restrained and unrestrained aura. By the time Silen took his first step and landed on the ground, his entire body was covered in armor. This sudden transformation stunned everyone, including Dias and the others besides Silen. Although he was wearing a layer of armor, he did not look clumsy at all. Moreover, Selene's actions when he turned around and started running were very smooth. He did not slow down in the slightest because of the appearance of the armor. The armor didn't look thick at all, but it was able to block all the incoming bioweapons. Silen didn't care about the incoming bioweapons at all. He called for Hui Mao and Yu to hurry toward the fourth entrance. They were going to clear out the mutated parasites at the exit first. This would save them some time when they got out later. After revealing the armor, Silen charged forward in a spurt of energy. The bioweapons pouncing on the armor were sent flying. Hui Mao and Yu weren't afraid of these bioweapons in the slightest, so the three of them charged forward with an indomitable spirit. After Silen's figure gradually disappeared into the distance, the people from Golden Willow and Luminous Flower muttered to themselves, "What was that just now?" The 11th squad fell silent. They had heard from Silen that he was going to collect the materials for Shimu to make a protective armor, but they all thought it was just an upgraded version of the protective suit. The armor that appeared on Silen's body just now should be the one he was talking about, right? I heard that the materials are almost all gathered, and we'll be wearing something like that soon? Really, this is too fucking exciting. Carrie, Xiao Shang, and the rest felt as if they had been injected with chicken blood. Their minds that had been worn out by the biochemical beasts and parasites suddenly recovered to a state of excitement. The sticky dark gray liquid on their bodies didn't seem so annoying anymore. Carrie roared in his heart, "Little bugs, I'm going to waste my time with you this time. In the future, when I put on that armor, I won't play with you anymore. Just treat it as the enjoyment before wearing the armor." Yep, that's a pretty good psychological suggestion. On the other side, Silen quickly ran towards the fourth entrance. The biochemical beasts pounced on him one after another and crashed into his armor, producing banging sounds. Due to the excessive impact, a lot of dark gray blood splashed out, but Silen didn't pay any attention to this. When they finally saw the hatch in front of them, Silen had Moon open it. The fourth entrance opened and Silen jumped out. At the same time that Silen jumped out, Hui Mao also changed its form. It expanded to 3 meters tall, and its body reflected a cold and domineering metallic luster. The 2 wings on its back spread out with a faint silvery gray light. These 2 wings were like 2 propellers, allowing Hui Mao to fly quickly in space. However, it was probably the first time that it flew in this form, and Hui Mao didn't control it well. With a sudden charge, it flew a long distance and even rolled a few times. Silen, I really can't rely on this cat too much. Silen popped out the rope on his wrist and attached it to the surface of the transport ship. He retracted the rope, and the freed Silen returned to the surface of the transport ship. Outside, Yudos was piloting a fighter to kill the mutated parasites that were running towards the fourth entrance. However, he couldn't use high-powered weapons because they were too close to the fourth entrance. Too much firepower would affect the people inside the transport ship. Apart from Yudos, there were also a few 11th Squad fighters piloting them. However, the pilots weren't humans but Shikai's robots. Although they weren't as efficient as Yudos, they were still of some help. Meanwhile, Hua Shi's men were doing their best to stop the mutated parasites with hard skin. The mutated parasites were much more resilient than before, and their mutated arms and legs were able to grip the surface of the transport ship in a twisted manner. This way they could crawl across the surface of the transport ship at high speed. The longer the fight dragged on, the more likely the parasites were to mutate again. After all, there were a lot of biochemical beasts and parasites around the radiation cabin. There were more than 2,000 crew members on the transport ship, but only 1,000 of them had been killed so far. Half of the remaining parasites were still on the ship. The pilots didn't dare to fire carelessly at the parasites and biochemical beasts near the fourth entrance, so Silin, Huimao, and a Yu took care of them. Silin waved his hand and a white gun appeared in his grip. The heads of 3 parasites that charged at him were instantly blown off. Some of the technicians on Luminous Flower's starship noticed Silin's actions, but when they took a closer look, they discovered that the number of times Silin fired his gun was disproportionately different from the number of parasites and biochemical beasts that were killed. At first, it was 1 to 3, then 1 to 4, then 1 to 5. Moreover, none of Luminous Flower's personnel had seen the gun Silin was wielding before. It wasn't even listed on the League of Stars' firearms leaderboard. He couldn't find such a gun outside of the ranking, not even a similar one. It was so white that there wasn't a single blemish on it, like a snowflake in space. The snow fell silently, but it brought with it a chill. Dark gray blood splattered along with the exploding parasites and biochemical beasts. The destructive power of this snowflake was so powerful that anyone who saw it felt as if a cold wind had suddenly descended from a land of extreme coldness. They could not help but shiver and then shiver again. These mutated parasites were much stronger than the ones on the transport ship, be it in terms of speed or defense. But the truth was that the mutated parasites that were crawling toward the fourth entrance had their heads blown off, and more than one of them had exploded at the same time. Under such circumstances, the people on Luminous Flower's starship who had been watching Silin couldn't help but be shocked. After the transformation, Whis finally found a balance point and adjusted its propeller-like wings to fly closer to the fourth entry point. However, it didn't stop in time and rammed straight into the transport ship. With its current tonnage and speed, it sent a couple of parasites and biochemical beasts flying. The parasites and biochemical beasts that were knocked out of the transport ship couldn't find a foothold in space, and they couldn't get any closer to where they wanted to go no matter how hard they tried. The biochemical beasts and parasites that were knocked away were taken care of by Moon one by one. Huimao originally planned to use its proud claws to tear these things apart, but it realized that it was easier to just crash into them. So, Huimao spread its wings wide and rushed over, knocking the parasites and biochemical beasts that were running toward it off the surface of the transport ship like a broom. Moon also cooperated to take care of these things that had almost no power to fight back. It was almost like a game. Truth be told, Whis and Sigma were doing what they were doing as if they were playing a game. They didn't feel the urgency and anxiety everyone else was feeling at all. Whis was still dozing off on Sigma's head when everyone was busy killing the parasites and biochemical beasts inside the passage. Would a normal person do something like this? While the people outside the transport ship were taking care of the mutated parasites and biochemical beasts, the people inside the passage finally arrived at the boarding entrance. One of Luminous Flower's large spaceplanes was approaching to receive them. Hua Shi Yewu and the old man jumped into the spaceplane from the fourth entrance. "Retreat!" Yudi said to the other 11 squads. Tang Qiuqiu, who had already put on her protective suit and mask, put away her gun without hesitation and jumped onto Xueqiu's shoulder. Meanwhile, Xueqiu shook off the 2 biochemical beasts that were chasing after him and jumped into the spaceplane from the boarding entrance. One of the bodyguards who had jumped into the spaceplane with Hua Shi couldn't help but click his tongue when he saw this. "Miss, that bear wasn't wearing any protective suit at all. Just what kind of people are these people? They charged out of the boarding entrance without any protective suit and acted as if nothing had happened to the mutated parasites. Yewu wanted to ask Huashi again, "Where did you find these people?" Just as the people at the 4th entry point boarded their spaceships, the people on the 11th team and Luminous Flowers starship reported that a very threatening high-energy object was flying toward them. Its power was comparable to 10 shipborne shockwave bombs. Moreover, they couldn't lock onto the object, and their attempts to intercept it failed. It wasn't moving in a straight line at all. Moreover, they couldn't calculate its trajectory. Hurry up! No one knew whether the object was going to attack the transport ship, the spaceplane, or the other starships. However, there was one thing they all knew: they had to act immediately. If they didn't, it would be too late by the time it reached them. Moreover, the object was flying at them from a good angle. Using the transport ship as cover, it was flying toward them at an unpredictable speed. "Captain, come back! Retreat, Silin!" Carrie and Yudi, who were already on the spaceplane, urged. "You guys retreat first. Huashi, take your men and leave now." Silin replied through the communicator and ran to the other side of the transport ship. He knew that the high-energy object that was chasing them was the real killer move. The spaceplane couldn't avoid it either. It was a product of Project Nightmare Taper, but he didn't know which project of Project Nightmare Taper Phase 2 it was. The spaceplane closed the hatch and flew away. "What's the captain doing?" Chiefing asked. "How the F***ck would I know?" Carrie tossed his gun aside in frustration and stared at the screen. Outside the transport ship, Silin chose a good angle and looked at the high-energy object flying toward them. "Time's up, right?" The high-energy object that couldn't be locked onto or intercepted in a short period of time suddenly glowed bright yellow and split into many tiny light spots. Each light spot had a very strong energy reaction. These bright yellow light spots were still flying in an irregular trajectory, but when these irregular light spots combined together, it was like a giant open mouth that swallowed them whole. Everyone in the spaceplane was stunned. What the hell was that? When the giant mouth was formed, Silin waved his hand and scattered parts floated in front of him. Silin's arms moved so fast that they couldn't see his hands at all. However, the scattered parts quickly took shape. There was a snake pattern that looked like lightning on it. A cannon? Just when everyone was confused, a white beam shot out of the cannon. Without a sound, a group of lightning streaked across the dark cosmic sky, striking at the giant mouth that was biting over. Chapter 341. There was no blood-boiling explosion, but the shockwave produced by the collision between the lightning and the giant mouth was visible to the naked eye. The shockwave spread out like a net that covered the sky, easily trapping the transport ship in front of it. The bright yellow dot and the white lightning collided and produced a radiation-like energy ripple that instantly shattered some of the large rocks floating in space that were closer to it. Then, it spread toward the transport ship, and the scale was much larger than the giant mouth from before. Whoosh! After firing the cannon, Silin immediately jumped onto Huemao's back, retracted the cannon, and used the rope on his wrist to wrap around Huemao's neck. Huemao's wings glowed with a silver-gray light, and everyone saw a silver-gray dot of light shoot out from the transport ship, away from the giant net that was coming toward them. Huemao's speed was so fast that no one with the best eyesight would be able to keep up with it. The giant energy net soon reached the transport ship, and the part of the ship that came into contact with the net was torn apart. The place where Silin had been standing was now a pile of debris floating in space. "Hurry up, fat cat," Silin urged. "I'm already fast enough." Huemao gritted its teeth. All the food it had eaten over the past few days had been consumed in such a short amount of time. "Meow, after this, I must nourish myself. Nourish myself." The starships and spaceships on the other side had long since left, but the 11th Squad's starship was the last to arrive. Shikai opened the hatch, and Huemao hurriedly flew into the cabin. Due to its lack of experience in retracting its wings, it rolled 10 meters away from the hatch and crashed into the fighter Udos was piloting. The impact left a huge dent in the fighter, and Scylla became the scapegoat. Scylla almost fainted on the spot. Although he had fired the cannon just now, it had consumed nearly 60% of Scylla's energy. Now, Scylla's entire arm felt like it was falling apart, and it was burning with pain. Moreover, the armor on his right arm had been severely deformed. If it wasn't for the protection of the armor, he would have been in an even worse state. He might have even fainted on the spot. Before that, Scylla had discussed it with Weimao. If he fainted on the spot, he would have to trouble Uncle Cat to bring him back. However, the effect of the armor was really good. Although it looked terrible, it was much better than Scylla had expected. The Purgatory Thundersnake Sea was Guan Feng's project Scylla had worked on before he returned to the League of Stars. The Purgatory Thundersnake Sea wasn't a gun, it was a cannon. However, according to Guan Feng's estimations, he wouldn't be able to use the Purgatory Thundersnake Sea in the next few years, or even decades. It was because no one could remain clear-headed after using it. Moreover, the assembly requirements for the Purgatory Thundersnake Sea were very high. Its overall accuracy was always stuck at 90% of its theoretical value. Both Scylla and Guan Feng had tried many times, but none of them had ever exceeded 90%. The overall accuracy affected the Purgatory Thundersnake Sea's attack power and accuracy. Guan Feng had been troubled by this for a long time, so he once joked that it would be great if someone could assemble the Purgatory Thundersnake Sea in space. The special environment of space reduced the occurrence of errors, and it was the best way to assemble the Purgatory Thundersnake Sea in theory. However, everyone who could move in space wore protective clothing. Although the protective clothing didn't restrict a person's movement too much, it greatly affected the assembly process. Guan Feng definitely didn't expect to see this kind of armor. The connection between the armor and the user's nerves allowed the armor to synchronize with the user's movements almost completely. Scylla couldn't feel the weight of the armor or the cannon barrel at all in space, so he was certain that the overall accuracy of the Purgatory Thundersnake Sea he assembled just now was definitely over 90%. The lightning it shot out was proof of the assembly's effectiveness. The group stared at the screen for a long time before they came back to themselves. What was that just now? Yiwu asked. The question sounded very familiar, as if someone had asked it before. Why did it appear so often? Maybe the 11th Squad was a team that kept surprising people over and over again. A third of the transport had been destroyed by the energy wave, and the remaining 2/3 had been destroyed by Hua Shi's order. There were still biochemical beasts and parasites inside. Plus, Hua Shi wasn't planning to let the transport continue to exist. There were some secrets hidden inside, and she wasn't going to let anyone find them. Once Scylla returned to the starship safely, the rest of the 11th Squad quickly returned to their own starships as well. Even if they were partners, they had to be on high alert at all times. After all, a hunter's partnership was short-lived. They might be partners during this mission, but they might become enemies during the next one. There were far too few hunters who could form a stable friendship with each other. After all, no one was willing to open their hearts easily, especially in an environment where the situation was unclear. It was obvious that the Merchant Alliance didn't want to get too involved with the hunter regiments, and Scylla didn't want to get involved with the complicated interests of non-hunter forces either. Scylla had never underestimated the military's capabilities. In the past, everyone had thought that it was a sleeping lion, but in reality, that lion had not slept at all. Its eyes were closed, but it did not mean that it was unaware of anything. On the contrary, perhaps it had already unwittingly let down its guard while everyone else was watching. Everything was set up. Right now, the military was divided into a few factions, but no one could tell what kind of trump cards each of them held. The 8 marshals were definitely in possession of the results of Project Nightmare, especially the 2 leading forces. It was just that they didn't know who or how many of the 8 marshals were involved in this operation. The Nightmare Taper project was a military project, and the high-energy object just now also proved that the military could not help but attack Sector M. It was very likely that they were after the minerals in their possession. But why would they need so many minerals? The conflict must be intensifying. The minerals aside, the military's actions served as a warning as well. Their ultimate goal wasn't to kill the people on the transport ships, but to teach them an unforgettable lesson if they could. The old man that Hua Shi and Yewu had treated differently was probably their target. Sillin guessed that the old man was a political figure representing Sector M at the moment. Hua Shi fulfilled her end of the deal and gave the 11th squad a few extra oars. They were all common crafting oars, and although they weren't very expensive, they were still very much needed by hunters. It saved the 11th squad a lot of work. Thank you, Team 11, for your help this time. Not bad at all. I look forward to seeing you become the best Vanguard B squadron ever, Hua Shi said. She wasn't stupid enough to challenge Sillin to a duel. Even if Sillin's arm was injured, Hua Shi didn't think that her chances of winning were close to 0. A lot of Hua Shi's trauma had faded away, but not because of Sillin. It was because of Tang Qiuqiu. Hua Shi couldn't help but recall the scene when Tang Qiuqiu fired her gun. Hua Shi couldn't help but reflect on the fact that Tang Qiuqiu was able to achieve what many A-rank Geno gunners couldn't even dream of. She wasn't an adult, and her genetic rank wasn't high either. Sillin smiled noncommittally at Hua Shi's words. Is your arm all right? Hua Shi pointed at Sillin's arm with her chin. It was wrapped in a healing device. It's nothing serious. I'll be fine after a while, Sillin replied. In Tico's words, Sillin would have had to go through a long period of induction treatment if it wasn't for the armor. Where's the cat? Hua Shi looked to her left and right, but she couldn't see the cat anywhere. She didn't even notice the piece of metal it was using to sharpen its claws. Celine pursed her lips. It's weak, and it's currently on the starship recovering its body. When she said the word weak, Celine really felt like she was grinding her teeth. To Sillin's surprise, Hua Shi brought up the issue on the transport ship. Yewu said that someone tampered with the gate's programming, but it didn't work. I'm sure you guys are part of the reason, especially that talented kid. Hua Shi was referring to Ayu. She suspected that there was a spy in their ranks and was currently investigating the matter. If it weren't for Ayu's help, they might not even have made it back alive. That kid is pretty good. Sillin didn't want to explain Ayu's situation to anyone. Seeing that Sillin didn't want to talk about it, Hua Shi didn't press the issue any further. Instead, she changed the subject and said, Hunters like you should know more about biochemical beasts than I do. I'd like to hear your opinion. A pause later, she added, 2 boxes of rare minerals as a consultation fee. Sillin thinks for a moment. Did you ask Yewu and the others who escaped the transport ship if there are many places on the ship that contain radioactive energy? While the amount might not be enough to threaten a human's body, there are many places on the ship that contain radioactive energy. Logically speaking, it's very hard to find radioactive energy outside of the radiation warehouse. You know better than anyone else. Radioactive energy is what excites the bioweapons that come out of the lab as bioweapons. There are indeed radioactive ores among the ores we're transporting, and quite a lot of them. That would explain why the incident on this transport ship broke out in such a short period of time. Hua Shi didn't need to explain too much to understand what Sillin was trying to say. She immediately contacted her subordinates to track down the spies. Radioactive energy was a good starting point. By the time Sillin returned to the starship with the promised payment, Week was enjoying a bag of fish biscuits with a very capable kid. Week was eating so much that crumbs were scattered all over the floor. From time to time, he would compare and comment on King Kong's animal-themed porn. Celine shook her head and did not bother about the 2 of them. The A squad member asked, Shimu, I've prepared all the materials you listed. I'll leave the armor to you. Just let me know if you need any help. Shikai, speed up the implantation of AI on the starship. Try to finish it before we return to HQ. Are you worried that something might happen during the meeting? Shimu asked. Just in case. Overall, it's good. Beaver interrupted Silen's reply. Commander, I've received a call from the A Squad. Transfer it. Silen returned to his room and turned on his communicator. Bearded Bart's face appeared on the screen. Senior Bart? I thought it was Senior Songbaleruo, Silen said. Bart stroked his signature long beard and chuckled. His smile did not reach the bottom of his eyes, but there was still killing intent in his eyes. That guy with the big hat is injured.